This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Bryan, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. This harmony we achieved is now under attack from a small but extremely dangerous group of individuals. We call them Divergents. They are, in essence, the worst of what humanity used to be: rebellious, defiant, and uncontrollable. It's Insurgent, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. This is the second episode of our gigantic summer series.
Will we ever have a summer series that's not gigantic?
I don't think so. I don't know if it's possible for us to do a summer series where the episodes aren't 3 hours long, and I don't know why. Well, part of it is because the books tend to be, fairly long, and then I think the bigger part is that we both have notes, and I don't know, for whatever reason, but we have 16 pages of notes, so it's going to be another long one. If you have not seen or read Insurgent, we're going to start with a brief little summary for you, but we wanted to remind you, as always, you can do us a giant favor if you are new here and enjoying our Insurgent series. Just head over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, any of those places. Find us on those platforms. Follow us, engage with us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you really want to support us, head over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. You can support us there for a few bucks a month, get access to bonus content. We didn't plan this, but it worked out just in time for the 20th anniversary. We're doing, I don't think we planned it, right?
No, I did not plan that.
We're doing our bonus episode for July is Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. It's not out yet, but it will be within the next week or two. So if you would like to hear our thoughts on Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, head over to patreon.com/This Film is Lit. Give us $5 a month and you get access to that bonus content as well as all of our other bonus content. All right, here it is. If you have not read the book or watched the film Insurgent, let us sum it up. If you're not interested in a summary, you can just skip right to 1134 to get to our analysis in Better in the Book.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Okay, so I did source these summaries off of Wikipedia because I was in a hurry. And also, I don't know if I could summarize this book with a gun to my head.
I could not.
But here we go. This is a summary of the book Insurgent. After the events of Divergent, Triss, Tobias, Caleb, Peter, and Marcus seek refuge in the Amity sector. Triss overhears Marcus and Amity leader Joanna discuss the fact that the abnegation leaders died to protect secret information. Erudite and the Dauntless traitors arrive to arrest the Divergents, but Triss flees with 4, Caleb, and Susan Black on a train to the factionless sector. There, they meet Tobias's mother, Evelyn, who tries to persuade her son to sway Dauntless into joining forces with the factionless against Erudite. Triss and Tobias head to Candor headquarters, where the other Dauntless now reside. Under truth serums, Tobias confides his reasons for transferring to Dauntless, and Triss reveals her killing of Will in self-defense, which strains her relationship with her friend Christina. That night, the Dauntless traitors, led by Eric, arrive and shoot simulation serums into their fellow Dauntless and knock everyone unconscious except for the Divergents. As Eric begins executing the Divergents, Triss wounds him and allows the others to capture him as the remaining traitors flee. To prevent Janine from holding another prisoner exchange, the Dauntless vote to execute Eric, which Tobias does without hesitation. To avoid being dependent on Candor, the Dauntless return to their own headquarters and disable most of the security cameras inside. However, Triss is alerted by Christina that one camera has caused 3 Dauntless members, Marlene, Hector, and Key, to become simulated into attempting suicide unless a Divergent is handed over. They are unable to save Marlene. Triss surrenders to Erudite and is placed in a cell by Peter and, to her shock, Caleb, both of whom are working with Janine. Tobias follows and is captured, but not before he convinces Dauntless to ally with the Factionless. After unsuccessful simulation tests, Janine orders Triss's execution, but Peter swaps the lethal dose with a paralytic and frees Tobias, and the three escape to Abnegation. Triss meets with Marcus, who tells her that Janine has withheld Abnegation's secret. Triss, Christina, and Marcus head for Amity to request Joanna's help. She, alongside several others, choose to assist them despite Amity's resistance. They are joined by Kara and another erudite renegade, Fernando, who act as navigators. The insurgents infiltrate erudite headquarters. Fernando is killed, but they manage to access Janine's laboratory. Inside, Triss faces down simulations before she confronts Janine, who is cornered by Tori. Tori kills Janine and then brands Triss a traitor. The invasion of Erudite over, Triss learns of the casualties, including Lynn, and the fact that the Factionless have taken all weapons to rule in Janine's place. Triss is handcuffed alongside Christina, Marcus, and the other insurgents, but manages to pass the information to Tobias, which he and Caleb share through the computers. The secret video, narrated by Edith Pryor from An Organization Fighting for Peace, reveals that the world had become corrupt and the city was sealed to allow the divergence to increase, and Amity was then to open the fence forever and allow the population to re-enter the world. The room erupts into chaos as the book ends.
All right, I'm going to do a quick summary of the movie. I will say it's very similar-ish. There's quite a few changes. Obviously, we'll talk about them. If you do, you could just skip forward. If you needed just a rough idea of what the plot was, the book summary gives you pretty close. But if you want a more detailed summary, here's the movie one. But if you don't care, just skip forward a minute or two. 5 days after the assault on Abnegation faction by the erudite leader Janine and her mind-controlled Dauntless soldiers, Janine has declared martial law and that the Divergents and their allies are the enemy. Among the Abnegation wreckage, the Dauntless leaders Max and Eric recover a box with all 5 faction symbols on its sides. Janine presumes that it contains data from the city's founders and the means to end the Divergence problems. As only Divergents can open the box, she orders all Divergents to be captured. Meanwhile, Triss, 4, Caleb, and Peter hide within the Amity compound. Eric leads a Dauntless crew to test all the occupants for Divergence. Peter discloses the group's location as the others escape and board a train headed into Factionless territory. 4 reveals to the Factionless that his name is Tobias Eaton, the son of the Factionless leader, Evelyn, whom he still resents for leaving him with his abusive father, Marcus. At the Factionless hideout, Evelyn suggests that Dauntless and Factionless unite against Erudite, but 4 declines. The next morning, the 3 leave for Candor to meet up with the remaining Dauntless. During the trek, a disheartened Caleb splits from the group. Upon arrival, Triss and 4 are arrested and brought before Candor leader Jack Kang, who intends to deliver them to Janine. However, 4 pleads for a trial with the use of Candor's truth serum. The serum reveals the real events, and they are absolved of their crimes, but Triss tearfully admits to killing Christina's lover, Will, which angers Christina. The Dauntless, who have sided with Janine, attack Candor, and many Candor members are shot with metal serum injection needles. Max and Eric capture Triss and discover that she has a Divergent reading of 100%, making her the perfect subject to open the box. 4 arrives to save Triss and executes Eric for his crimes. Meanwhile, Janine, frustrated that none of the Divergent subjects have survived the simulations required to open the box, is approached by Peter, who suggests that the best way to get to Triss is by exploiting her selflessness. By exploiting her selfless abnegation upbringing. Back at the Factionless base, 4 reluctantly agrees with Evelyn that war is inevitable. Janine activates the discs, which are a mind control device that causes... Who wrote this summary? I know this is from Wikipedia.
Person.
I know, but it's like
know.
Every time and I do this very often, I copy them. I'm like, do you even know? That's not the plot, really. Like, it is, but it's not. They use weird details wrong. It just always drives me crazy. Janine activates the discs, which they're injection dart thingies, which control a mind control serum device thing that causes Christina and her friends Marlene and Hector to walk. I guess if you only watched the movie and didn't read the book, this might be how you summarized it. I guess, maybe. She activates the discs, which are a mind control device that cause Christina and her friends, Marlene and Hector, to walk robotically towards a ledge and ask for Triss's surrender. Triss and Tori manage to grab Christina and Hector in time, but Marlene plunges to her death. Overcome by guilt, Triss turns herself in to Janine at the Erudite headquarters. Triss threatens to kill herself rather than comply with the testing, but she is stopped by Caleb, who has returned and committed himself to Erudite under Janine. Under Janine, Caleb, and Peter's watch, Triss overcomes the first 4 simulations before she requires rest. The next day, after discovering that 4 was captured while he tried to rescue her, she fails. The next day, after discovering that 4 was captured while trying to rescue her, she fails the Amity trial and her vital signs cease, shocking Janine. Peter takes her body to 4, reveals he faked her death, and assists 4 in overpowering the guards. Triss now is determined to unveil the box's message, and with Peter's help, they return to the simulation room, and she successfully opens the box in front of everyone. A hologram appears explaining that the walled city and the faction system were part of an experiment, with Divergents as its ultimate goal. The world is waiting outside for them to rejoin it. Realizing that she has lost all of her power, Janine orders that the box be buried, destroyed, essentially, and 4 and Triss be executed. However, the factionalists break in just in time and rescue the pair. Janine and Caleb are arrested, and the message is broadcast to the entire city. Hailed as a hero, Triss is eager to explore the outside world. In her cell, Janine wonders what might lie beyond the wall, but Evelyn tells Janine that she will never find out, and then shoots her in the head. The end. All right, that's the movie, roughly. Give or take. Again, whoever wrote this for Wikipedia did an okay job, in my opinion, but whatever, it's fine. We're copying it, so we can't say anything. We have so much to talk about. Let's get into it in our first segment Better in the Book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
As we've mentioned in the other episodes, if you're joining us just for Insurgent for some reason, our normal episodes, one of us reads it, one of us doesn't. In this one, we both read it, both watched it. And so we're just going through our Better in the Book, Better in the Movie Nailed It sections, and talking about what we preferred in each and which we preferred overall, and asking other questions. We actually do have a Lost in Adaptation because we were confused about some stuff that we're just going to discuss. Yeah. We didn't know where else to put some of these notes, so we just put them in Lost in Adaptation because it felt like it made sense. And then later we will get to our predictions, see how we did on our predictions for Insurgent, and then give our predictions for Allegiant in our Bryan and Katie Predict the Divergent series section. And then we'll wrap up, as always, with our final verdict. But first, we're going to find out what was better in the book. My first note is related to Joanna. Once they get to Amity, well, they're already at Amity, basically, at the start of this book, essentially. Mm-hmm. And we are introduced to Joanna Reyes, who is the leader of Amity, essentially. They don't really have leaders, but she's the political representative, at least in the book. That's how she's described. Abnegation is the faction that, like, runs the government, is, like, the government, basically. Mm-hmm. But each faction has, like, a representative who interfaces with Abnegation, and Joanna was that. But within Amity, they don't, like, have an actual, like, hierarchical leader system. They are a lateral, or not lateral, what is the word? Whatever that, you people, leftists know, whatever the term for not lateral. Horizontally structured. I don't know. It's got a name like that. Anyways, no leadership, but she is kind of their leader. And in the book, she's described as having a very intense scar that covers, like, half of her face, and it also to the point where her eye is, like, damaged from it or whited out, kind of. It sounds very intense and, like, cool and badass. And in the movie, she basically doesn't have a scar.
Yeah, her scar was some weak sauce in the movie.
I legitimately did not notice it. You said that. You're like, wow, her scar's really weak. And I had already written a note that said, oh, they just didn't give her a scar.
I thought she didn't have a scar at first, too. And then she, like, turned, and I saw the little bit of, like, dark on her cheek.
Like a tiny little bit.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah. And it's like, that's whatever. It's not a big deal. But the main reason I had it in Better in the Book is I thought it was very funny. I guess maybe funny is not the right term. But Triss has to go on this journey over the course of the book where the first time she sees Joanna, she thinks to herself, well, she would have been pretty if not for the scar or something along those lines. And I was like, well, that scar sounds fucking cool. So I don't know what you're talking about. And then at the end of the book, Triss realizes as Joanna is talking that she's not pretty in spite of the scar or something like that. She's pretty because of it or with it or something along those lines, that it amplifies her beauty. And I was like, oh, that's very funny to me that was a journey that she had to go on. Now, again, I get it. She's 16. She's dumb.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. I think that's fine. Like a fine thing to write into your story, kind of like, hey, you know, like a character, one of your protagonists learning, you know, realizing that, kind of being weird and judgmental about that and you know, coming to terms and realizing that there are different ways to appreciate beauty and blah 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 and stuff like that. I think it's fine, but it is a moment where reading it as like a well-adjusted adult makes it feel very like cheap and silly.
Yeah, it felt a little silly to me. I think just because it was like every time we interacted with Joanna, Triss was like fixated on the scar and how she would have been beautiful if not for the scar.
Yes.
The other kind of issue that I had with it was that I wasn't sure how it was connected to like any other themes.
No, not
in the
really.
Story.
No, I would say
just
not
kind of
really.
hanging out.
It was
by
kind
itself.
of its own thing. I think that's fine. Again, I don't mind. I think you can have a little kind of throwaway little message about, you know, I don't know, not having very specific beauty standards or whatever. I think is a fine little message to have. And she kind of does go on that journey, but it is still just doesn't work for me as an adult. I'm like, well, yeah, obviously it sounded cool. I don't know what you're talking about. And not to say, you know, whatever, scars or whatever, they are what they are. I just thought it was just an interesting detail. And the movie just doesn't really address it at all because the scar is barely visible. There's finally a discussion in the book about how erudite is basically required for this society to function that we don't get in the movie.
Yeah.
Triss is like annoyed at how important they are, but it is one of those things because this society makes no sense.
They do all the tech.
Do everything.
Yeah.
Like everything that, I mean, not everything, but you know, some of the most important stuff that this society has and needs.
Like basically anything science-based.
Yes.
They do it.
Medicine, all of medicine, apparently, it would seem.
Yeah, medicine, tech, food science, farming science, anything.
All that stuff is them. And it's like, yeah, they're pretty important. And again, it does get back to, boy, the reveal at the end of, well, we already spoiled it with the summary, but the reveal at the end of this is all like some big experiment makes this make. That is one of the big parts we're going to talk about in Lost in Adaptation, but this, I still am so interested. It's the thing I'm most interested for about the sequel is, do we get any answers for what the thought process was behind this weird ass experiment? I have to know, but we'll get there later, or we'll discuss that more later.
There's a quick little scene while they're hanging out in Amity where Tobias and Caleb have like some bro time, and they're like hanging out and throwing butter knives.
I did not remember.
You don't remember that? No. Tobias is like trying to teach him to throw a knife, I guess.
Yeah.
But they only have butter knives because Amity doesn't allow weapons of any kind.
Yeah.
One of the like kind of mysteries that we're introduced to at the beginning of this book, I guess it's mentioned in the last book. I don't remember. Was it mentioned in the last book? Like the secret message thing that Abnegation knew about?
If it was very in passing and I don't recall it. I'm not saying it couldn't have been, but it
so one of the first like new mysteries that we have in this installation is that Triss finds out that Abnegation had some kind of like information from the founders of the city.
Yeah. I don't even know if does it even that specifically implied in the book? It could be. I just don't recall. I remember
think it was.
Okay, and maybe it is. I just remember there was some secret.
Yeah, there was some like secret information that Abnegation had that they were like planning to reveal, and that was supposedly the reason that Erudite attacked them, was to like keep them from revealing this.
Yes, and we will later find out in the book that they were specifically planning to reveal this information to everybody, whereas at this point we don't know that. We just know they had this information and Janine wanted this information. Right. We later find out that they were going to reveal it and she didn't want that to happen.
So the way that the movie does it, I will grant, makes more sense. The movie just has Marcus be like, hey, there's this other thing that I need to tell you guys about, and maybe we should like be concerned about that too. And of course the main group does not like Marcus, so they're like, get out of here, old man. We don't care about you. But I actually liked the way that the book did it. Where Tris, like, she sees Marcus and Joanna going into the orchard and like follows them and overhears them discussing this secret information.
Yeah, and then she confronts Marcus about it. And it's like, what are you talking? Like, what is this? Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting because there are a couple little implications here and there in the book. That all of these adults who are like super gung-ho about factions used to like fraternize with each other.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, because I had a similar note about how we find out that, and this detail is not in the movie, and I liked it in the book, we find out that Triss's dad was erudite when he was born, and that he was actually friends with Janine when they were younger, and they like grew up together and were friends. And I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like,
no, none of it really matters, but it is interesting, and it makes the world feel like a little deeper.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Then in Amity, in the book, it is revealed that this is completely cut from the movie, that they have this drug that they use. Triss gets in a fight. We'll talk about that. She gets in a fight with Peter, and she has to go to this room, and they're like talking to her, and then they inject her with this drug, and it's some like calming drug. Ends up being kind of like a ecstasy type thing or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's some nebulous. It's not supposed to be anything specific. It's just like a nebulous.
Happy drugs,
and that's what it is. She gets like loopy and happy. And I thought that whole thing was interesting. I have mixed feelings about the whole narrative throughout this book that Janine has of like, see, every group has weird, messed up. Mainly, we'll talk about it later with the faction list, but whatever. I thought it was at least interesting, and there was some fun moments here that I was looking forward to in the movie, and specifically, like, Triss is like out of it and loopy, and she's talking to somebody. One of the Amity people, and she's like, I'm not very nice, am I? And the other person goes, not most of the time, no. And I thought that was very funny. And then she's talking to Tobias while she's still on this drug, and Tobias is like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, that's why you like me, isn't it? Because you're not very nice either. And I really enjoyed that exchange in the book. It made me chuckle. So
yeah,
I was disappointed it wasn't in the movie.
Yeah, I was a little torn on the movie leaving this out. Because we also find out that Amity puts it in the bread.
Yes.
So they're just like constantly dosing their entire population with this stuff.
Yes, and it doesn't make them like Triss. There's also a detail that she got basically an overdose, like way too much of it, and that's why she's all loopy and stuff. Everybody else gets like microdosed this stuff essentially.
Yeah. And I did think it was kind of interesting world building, but it doesn't end up like meaning all that much.
We don't really come back to it or discuss it.
We don't do anything with it. We don't discuss it.
It doesn't. Yeah. Again, I think it's more so just it's setting up the idea that no matter which faction, you might think, oh, Amity's great. They seem super chill, but actually they're doing this nefarious consent violating thing without people knowing, and it's everybody sucks kind of. Again, I don't know necessarily what the point we're going for with that, but that is what we're doing, is establishing the fact that each faction has something that makes them kind of messed up. So one of the big changes that I'm sure a lot of book people were really upset with, who were fans of the book in the movie, because I remember seeing a thing about this, we talked about this in the prequel on IMDb, is in the book, Triss is not able to hold or shoot a gun at all because she has PTSD from killing Will. I like that. I think it's at least interesting for her character. In the movie, she literally just like using guns from moment one, has no problem. She has other issues she's dealing with, but it is not like shooting people. She grabs a rifle in the very opening of this when they're getting chased out of Amity and just unloads at a bunch of the erudite dauntless who are not like under mind control. I mean, they are evil, quote unquote, in this instance, but they're not, they're not like under mind control. And I just thought it was, which I guess is better in her defense, arguably, like in her opinion, it would probably be better. Anyways, point being, she does just shoot a bunch or at them. I don't think she actually hits anybody. I don't know. It's not a big deal. I thought the movie worked fine without it, because again, they work other elements of like what she's dealing with and going through. But I thought I enjoyed the whole gun PTSD storyline.
I mean, honestly, the movie's depiction with her like having nightmares and flashbacks worked better for me. I just thought that the gun plot point in the book was a little bit clunkily done. Although I may just feel that way because it kind of dovetailed with one of my other complaints about Triss supposedly being reckless. We have more thoughts on that later.
Definitely have more notes on that later.
It didn't really bother me in the movie.
It wasn't a huge issue.
There's also so much going on that I think that would have been kind of a complicated thing to portray.
No, I don't disagree. I think it's fine. It didn't bother me that much. I thought it was a fine little kind of thing for her character to deal with in the book. And again, it's whatever. I wasn't completely upset like some people were apparently with the movie for not including that.
Yeah. When they get on the train with the factionless in the book, they hop this train and surprise, surprise, it's full of all the factionless people. Some of whom are carrying weapons.
Yes.
And I didn't see him in the movie, but there was one man whose weapon was described as a large plank of wood with a nail sticking out of the end. And I really wanted him to be in the movie.
2x4 with a nail.
2x4 with a single nail on the end.
It would be very funny. Yeah, because normally when you see that, you're thinking like the baseball bat with a bunch of nails through it or whatever. But nope, which I mean, it's an effective weapon. There's no. I'm not arguing if you hit me with a 2x4 with a nail on the end, I'm probably gonna kill somebody. But it is. It would have been fun to see that person. A person I was missing from, which I had a feeling they wouldn't be there because they weren't in the first movie. But that is Edward. Does not make an appearance in this film, and I thought that was fun in the book. Edward shows up as part of the factionless. And if you don't recall, Edward was one of the Dauntless Initiates in book 1, who Peter ended up stabbing in the eye with a butter knife.
Yeah.
And we find out in this one some more details, like it wasn't as unprovoked as it seemed, supposedly. He was sleeping and he stabbed him in the face with a butter knife, it seems. But there's some...
Well, they say that Edward did something,
yes, but they don't say what.
Yeah,
so who knows? But anyways, but he is now back and he has an eye patch in the book, and he's one of the factionless. And I just thought that was a fun connection to book 1, having him show up and having an actual connection to the factionless and connecting somebody that was in Dauntless and dropped out. I thought was at least fun, but again, with him not being in the first movie.
I think they could have at least given that one main factionless guy an eye patch.
Yeah, there's no reason not to.
just as like a little thing for book readers, you know.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, but whatever. Then in the book, after they get to the factionless base, we get this section where they answered. I was laughing because they just Veronica Roth just answers like a handful of questions.
We just like go down a line
in a row that we had from the previous book, specifically about like the factionless and stuff like that. And I just thought it was very funny. One of those is that they break down what people make up the factionless, and apparently it's mostly from Dauntless because their initiation is like the most difficult or whatever. Then Erudite, then Candor, and then Amity, like in descending number of people, percentage of people or whatever. And there's supposedly basically nobody from Abnegation because Abnegation doesn't like kick people out or whatever. But we also then after that get an answer because you had asked this about what happens to old Dauntless.
Yeah.
Which it was mentioned maybe in the first, or maybe you had some reason that you brought it up and I don't remember why, but.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But anyway, she answers that and it is that they just get kicked out essentially.
Yeah. Oh, I think
once they can't do their
the reason
job.
that I had wondered that was because their Dauntless headquarters is not like accessible if you're not able-bodied.
Handicap accessible, yeah.
That section did feel a little bit like Veronica Roth like went onto the fandom
it's not
blogs.
ADA compliant. Yeah.
And she just like took a peek at what everyone was wondering about and criticizing and was like, I'll just answer a couple. Yeah.
There are a few things here. Like that throughout. It doesn't feel as much as some of the stuff in 50 Shades last year, but there's definitely some things where you could tell it feels like somebody. Well, and she explicitly admits it in a note that I'll talk about later at the end of this book in the bonus materials. There is a thing she specifically talks about that was a response to some feedback she got. But anyways, Speaking of the factionless, we then meet Evelyn, who is Tobias's mother, played by Naomi Watts in the film. And my only note is she felt a little bit too clean and put together.
Yeah.
For the factionless. So I know what we're going for. We're showcasing the fact that the factionless aren't what we expected. They aren't, you know, they have their own society, they have their own thing, which is a criticism, not even a criticism. We were hoping to see that in this book. So I was glad that we did, because that was one thing we talked about in the first one, is like, you know, this what are the factions going to be? Is it going to be that they are just like this weird stereotype of homeless people? And it's a little bit more complicated and interesting than that. And I appreciated that. But that being said, it still felt like her hair is like flawless in the movie to the point of like, okay. And now I get it. She's like the leader, and maybe we're trying to do a thing of like, because she ends up kind of being not a villain, but like an morally gray, like to in the book to straight up maybe villain kind of potentially. So we'll see where it goes, I guess. The end of the book is not looking great for Evelyn, but that being said, so maybe they're going for a thing where it's like, I mean, she's hoarding resources
I also
for herself.
Kind of got that
something.
Vibe when they were having dinner, and they had like a nice setup with a table, and
kind of implying that she's actually like hoarding resources or something like, which
or
is
like taking the best stuff. For
taking
herself.
all the best stuff for herself or something, and maybe that's what they're going for. If that wasn't what they were going for, then she's an underground rebel leader,
right?
Like, again, I get it. She shouldn't look like a caricature of an unhoused person, but
they could have made her like look like a warlord or something.
Yes, or look like she looks like a wine mom. Like I like a very well manicured wine mom. And
I said this to you while we were watching, and you disagreed with me, but I thought she looked too young.
I didn't disagree. She looks very young, but then I looked it up, and she's 16 years older than the actor that plays Tobias, and she specifically says in the movie that she had him very young.
Yeah.
And I thought it worked because she came from Abnegation, and they're like a weird religious-y cult kind of faction. I bought the idea that maybe she got wifed up at 16 and immediately churned out a kid. That like worked for me. And again, they looked closer than they are, I think.
Yeah.
In age, but I can see so eventually they do leave the factionless and go to Candor, and once they get there, they have to take the truth serum testing or whatever for different reasons in the book and the movie. We'll discuss it, or maybe we won't. But they have to take the truth serum test. And in the book, there's a little detail that when they're giving them the truth serum injection, Triss insists on doing it herself. Mm-hmm. It's a little thing. I liked it for her character in trying to kind of take control of, especially after she just got dosed with and again, this isn't in the movie, but with the happy drugs at Amity, at Amity, and especially with the thing that comes back later, which we'll talk about in the movie. I thought it would have made sense for her to have that little character moment, and I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do that. But anyways, there's a little detail in the book, and again, I guess it kind of works in the movie because we don't really address this during the truth serum scene with Triss. She recounts what happened at the end of the last book when she went and stopped Tobias from running the simulation. Mm-hmm. And she confesses that she remembered, as she was fighting Tobias, she remembered her fear simulation test from earlier, where the way she passed it or succeeded was by letting herself be killed. And this is a detail I called out in the first one of the movie, changing that to her murdering her family or whatever.
Yes.
And that was a really weird change. Because in the movie, they have her like murder her family, whereas in the book, she lets Janine shoot her. And that change, I was like, this is such a weird change. And then in this, it comes back because she explains that she remembered how in her fear test, she let Janine shoot her and kill her, and that was whatever. And then so she thought of that moment while she was fighting Tobias, and so that's why she basically gave up and let Tobias kill her if he was going to. And then that is what triggered him to and we find out a bunch more details about what was going on with him, but basically what the serum they gave him made him like invert everything, where he thought he was shutting the I think he thought he was shutting the simulation down, and that Triss was there to stop him from shutting it down. So that's why he was fighting her. And then when she didn't try to kill him, when she gave up, he realized, oh, something's wrong. And that like triggered him to snap out of it, basically. And so it just made no sense to me. Again, the movie just kind of glosses over all this by not including this part of the questioning in the movie. But changing the fear test in the first movie messes up that climax, and it's even reinforced here again with this part. I thought in a way that it was just like, I don't know why you would change that, but
yeah, I don't know, it was a weird
because it doesn't
change.
come back in this movie in a way that matters either. So I don't. In fact, I would say, if anything, the opposite, based on how the simulation things end in this movie. It would make more sense for her to have experience with like letting go or whatever. I don't know. It's just this is a weird change. So I did end up missing Lynn. There's a character named Lynn who is in the book that does not show up in the movie. Was
she in book 1?
No, okay. I don't think so. But then again, I don't know, and we'll get to that in a bit. But when Triss gets to Candor, she takes her under her. She's one of the Dauntless, though.
Yes,
she's like one of the Dauntless who's hanging out at Candor. Who she wasn't. I think she was Dauntless born.
Uriah's.
Yeah, I think she's one of the Dauntless born. She might have been mentioned in the first book, but she's not like a character we like interact with or whatever. But she ends up kind of taking Triss under her wing. And there's this weird thing where she actually doesn't think, she has like a conspiracy theorist. Yes. She doesn't think Divergents actually exist and that it's all like this made up government conspiracy.
I loved that.
Yeah.
I felt like that was this universe's version of like the government did 9/11.
Yeah. And I liked Triss kind of figures out that it's actually like a defense mechanism. She actually kind of gets to the root of where a lot of conspiracy thinking comes from, is that Triss is like, she probably thinks this because she's trying to like comfort herself, because she was one of the people under the simulation at the end that attacked Abnegation or whatever. And so this is kind of like a thing she is lying to herself about to ease the guilt she feels for being part of that. Yeah. Because if Divergents aren't real and don't exist, then she's not failing for not being one or whatever. Essentially, I think is kind of what's going on. But anyways, I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting. Triss spends a lot of time in the book noting the details of Lynn's face and how full her lips are and like the curves of her body. Yeah. I will say this ends up seeming to come mostly from a place of envy, kind of, as opposed to.
But Triss does this with several characters throughout the book. Did you notice
she does.
That?
Yes, I noticed. But yeah, it does, at least in Lynn's case, come from a place mostly of envy. So no shipping. Also, spoilers, Lynn dies at the end of this book. So no shipping anyways.
Yeah.
Although you could ship.
You could do anything you want in fan fiction.
Also, you could, because we'll get to a detail later about Lynn. There's a little scene in the book that I thought the movie could have included that I enjoyed, which is when the Dauntless choose their new leaders. So the Dauntless faction at Candor, they're kind of leaderless because Eric and Max and the other people who were their leaders are now the evil, traitor Dauntless or whatever. So they need new leadership. They pick their new leaders. And originally it was going to be, there was 4 people like nominated: Tobias, Triss, Tori, and some guy.
Yeah,
who they eventually name, and Harrison, I believe, is his name. They don't.
We've never met him before.
Never met him, and I'm pretty sure in the scene, and I could be wrong with this, but I thought in the scene where he gets elected leader, they don't say his name, but then later they just start naming him, and I had to put together.
No, because somebody says his name when they nominate him.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
I
also had him kind of confused with Hector for a second when they were in that scene, because then that's why I was so confused, because I was like, he's a kid, and then I was like, oh, it's a different H name. Okay, cool.
Dude, the name, we'll get to it. But anyways, I liked them like choosing their new leadership, and Triss ends up turning it down and just letting Tobias and the other two. It's a little detail, but again, it's kind of some world building stuff that I thought was at least kind of interesting.
Yeah,
if not that interesting. Sure. I think it's whatever.
And shortly after that, after they elect their leaders in the book, they have like a little quote unquote trial for Eric. And I kind of preferred the book's version of it, where they more like listed out all of his transgressions, his crimes.
He makes Triss do it, and she does. I know, I agree. So I had this in better than the movie, but only one aspect of it. Overall, I liked how the scene played out in the book better in general. including there's thing where once they convict him, essentially it's a made up kangaroo court. They know he's guilty.
Yeah.
It's not like they need to present evidence. Been watching this guy murder people for the entire first book and then this one so far. But they're gonna execute him, and they do that by pulling out 3 guns, and which I believe this is not actually historically why this was done, but they pull out 3 guns and they put like a bullet in one of them, and then Tobias literally does the hat dance with them. He like swoops them around on the floor and mixes them all up. That way, one of the leaders has the bullet, but they don't know which one. And again, so this is based on like the old historical thing of like firing squads, all having only one, or all of them having bullets except for one person. And supposedly that was, and I believe that's a myth or it's more complicated than that. But anyways, the idea behind it was that if they would not load one of the rifles, that way if everybody who was part of the firing squad could have like plausible deniability that maybe theirs was the one that didn't they didn't shoot. But I've heard that's not true. I don't know the details of it, but I think I watched a video somewhere about that not being true. Anyway, so it's a similar kind of spin on that. And I also like before Tobias does, ultimately Eric is like, just do it, you coward. And Tobias is like, okay, and just shoots him in the head. But before he does, he says, be brave, which is what they all say, like, as it's like a thing they say when people are going to die or potentially or something like that. When they're taking their next step into the next beyond or whatever, they say, be brave. And I think the movie cut that line because they thought it would sound like too cruel. Because it would kind of sound like he's taunting him, which he is kind of, but also not really. I like it as a little world building detail, as like part of this ritual thing that the Dauntless do.
Yeah, it's just a demonstration that they have their own little culture.
Yeah. Yeah. But the reason I had this in better movie, the only thing that I liked better in the movie particularly was I liked moving it to right after the invasion.
Yes.
So in the book, the invasion happens at Candor, and then a lot of talking and blah 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 blah, and then eventually they're gonna leave because Candor is gonna turn them over, and before they leave, they elect the new leaders, and then they go execute Eric because Candor was gonna put him on trial, but Dauntless were like, no, we try he's ours. People. Yeah, we try our own people. Blah blah blah. So I just like smashing that together and just having them do it right after the invasion.
Yeah, I agree.
During that invasion, as we said in the description or in the summary, a lot of the people get hit with these like little darts, basically, that embed in their skin and inject simulation serum, which we will talk about later, into them. And it's a special serum that is continually active that they can use multiple times and kind of activate whenever they want. Supposedly, seemingly, I don't know why they don't just activate it all the time. Whatever. I don't know why they don't just immediately activate all of them and have them march to area. Whatever. But they can apparently activate it kind of whenever they want. And we get this scene, which is a fun, chilling scene in both the book and the movie, where they activate like 3 of the people because they want all the Divergent turned over. And so they threaten, they're like, hey, Divergent, come and turn yourself into erudite. If you don't, 3 people are going to kill themselves every day until you do or whatever. And they have these 3 people who are going to like jump off. And in the book, it's like off the roof of the building because they're at the Dauntless compound. But in the movie, they're in the Factionless headquarters, and it's like some ledge in the Factionless thing. I prefer the book's version slightly. The movie's is fine. But in the book, we at least kind of know who the people are that are about to jump off this building. In the movie, we're like, who are these people? Other than Christina. Christina becomes, and that's the difference, is that in the book, Christina is not one of the people who's going to jump. She actually comes and gets Triss, which was a problem I had in the book. It's like, why did she get Triss and only Triss?
I don't know.
Instead of like a bunch of people.
Sounding the alarm.
Yeah, she seems to see these people go climb to the roof to commit suicide and just like, I'll get just Triss to stop them. I'm like, okay, whatever. But in the movie, they make Triss one of the people who gets mind controlled in this moment. And Triss ends up saving her. So it's whatever.
Yeah, I was of 2 minds on that because I did like the movie adding Christina to the mix, especially with the tension between her and Triss at this time. And then in the book, we know Marlene and Hector like a little bit. So that part of it works better than it does in the movie.
Yeah. The thing I really missed in the movie that was in the book is actually after that scene is that once they save two of the people, but they don't save Marlene, and she falls into her death. And there's this moment in the book where as Triss is coming down from the roof, she's on the elevator by herself. She gets on the elevator and she just like completely breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as she gets off the elevator, she like recomposes herself. And I thought that had potential to be a really good, powerful scene.
Yeah.
Of like holding her composure until she gets on the elevator and then just losing it and then gathering herself again before she gets off the elevator in front of everybody. I was excited to see that scene acted, and it's not in the movie. But this is a little detail that I wish would have been in there.
I just want to call out this line real quick while we're talking about this scene. After this happens, I think this might be in the elevator. She like drops to her knees, but the line that Veronica Roth wrote is, "I dropped to the earth just as Marlene did." I'm like, Veronica, please, you can't say that.
Yeah, it's a little glib considering the yeah.
So then Triss decides she is going to turn herself into Erudite to prevent these suicides from happening. And in the movie, we see her get arrested immediately upon walking up to
She walks
Erudite.
through like a scanner that they have, and it's like, whoa.
It like identifies her. And that makes sense.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Perfect sense.
But in the book, she just like walks into the lobby and nobody notices or cares. And I thought that was so fucking funny.
It's very funny. She literally walks up to the desk and is like, "Excuse me." And the guy's like, "Hold on," and just ignores her. The guy like working at the front desk. I also enjoyed that scene in the book. But yeah, definitely the movie's version makes way more sense.
And I think the movie skipped this. I didn't notice it.
I didn't see it. I think it was in the first one, though.
Was it? Was it there in the first? There's apparently a giant portrait of Janine in the lobby at Erudite headquarters, and I guess the giant video screens are similar.
Yeah, there's a giant version of her on the building outside.
But I also just thought that was really funny.
Yes, but yeah, I'm pretty sure because that is also mentioned in the first book when Janine goes to, or when Triss goes to Erudite, and I'm pretty sure we see it in the first movie, but I could be wrong. But yeah, it's not in this one, but yeah, it gets replaced by a 500-foot tall, or maybe not 500-foot, but 100-foot tall video Janine on the side of the building. Once she does turn herself in, Janine is going to run a bunch of experiments on her. They're different in the book and the movie. We'll discuss that. But in the book, there's this little details that she's like, well, we're going to run all these experiments on you, and then at the end, we're going to execute you. And in the book, she like walks her into this room, and she shows her, she's like, this is the room where you're gonna die, and it's really chilling, and like I thought it was a very good like making your villain scary and intimidating and like terrifying scene. Again, there is no plan to execute her in the film, so that's probably the main reason they don't do that, but I liked that scene in the book.
Yeah. I mentioned that the experiments that they do in the book and the movie are different, and the movie's version of it is, I think, more digestible.
Yeah.
But one thing that I did miss from the book was Triss regularly taunting Janine for not being able to like fully trick her with a simulation.
There's multiple instances of this. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I liked that too. There's one moment in particular where she literally goes into like baby mode elementary school bully and just repeats back everything Janine says in like a mocking voice. And I'm like, okay.
Why not?
She is 16. Why fair not? Enough. Whatever.
Also, like, if this person's going to kill me anyway, fuck it. We ball, like, who cares?
Who cares? There's a little detail in the book that is in Triss's mind that I thought was interesting, is that over the days and maybe weeks that she is at Erudite and they're running these experiments, they just lock her in a room and then they walk her to whatever lab they're doing experiments on her in, and she keeps track of the hallways are all like just empty white. Mm-hmm. If you've seen Severance, like the hallways in Severance is what I was imagining. And she keeps track of the hallways because there's no markings or anything by how many steps it takes her to walk the length of the hallway, and so she has the hallways like it just ends up not mattering, but I just thought it was a fun little detail. She keeps track of, and it's a little character thing of like kind of the person that Triss is. So she like has names the hallways numbers like 47, 10, 12 or whatever, and it's just the number of steps that hallway takes her to walk, which I thought was again a fun little detail, kind of character building and just interesting. And then I mentioned earlier where the movie misses out on the opportunity of having Triss inject herself with the truth serum, because it even came back harder here that they really missed that opportunity when at this scene at the end in the movie where Janine is putting her into this simulation, but to do that they have these giant like tentacle needle things come down and like insert into her all over the place, and it felt like that would be really contrast well with it would amp up the how horrible what is happening to her in this scene is, because it's completely like violating her consent entirely, by having her do the injection herself in the candor scene, juxtaposing that to what's happening now. I think just would have amped it up a little bit even more. It's not a big deal, but anyways. There's this little detail in the movie that is not in the book. Well, obviously it's not in the book because it's a camera shot thing. I thought this did not work in the movie. It worked a little better because we find out that it's actually a simulation and not actually happening. But there's this moment where Janine is like taunting Triss, and we're in simulations, in and out of simulations. And there's this period at the end of the movie where we're not sure when you're in the simulation and when you're not intentionally. And there's this moment where she's in the simulation room, and so we think she's not in the simulation yet. And then Janine is talking to her and just like taunting her. And then it cuts to a close up of Triss's face, and the camera. And Triss is very upset because she's like mocking her about her family dying or getting her family killed or whatever. And it cuts to a close up of Triss's face, and the camera is like violently shaking in a way that was very comical to me. I get what they're going for. It just did not work for me. I will say, like I said, once I realized it was a simulation, I was like, okay, this works a little better because reality gets all weird and ultimately, like this where the scene goes after that. We'll talk about the world like explodes basically. But that particular shot before I knew it was a simulation, when the camera is like shaking on her face, I was like, oh, that's not a good whose choice. Was that the director's choice? That was not a good choice. And I think that's a failure just because until you realize it's a simulation, like I might have laughed out loud, maybe not laughed out loud, but I was just like, ugh. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, it's not good, but it's better that it's not actually. I didn't
really notice it.
It's a little thing. I don't know. That's the kind of thing that I know. Yeah. There's a little detail in the book that is not in the movie too, is that Tobias has been captured at this point. He came to try to rescue Triss. It's complicated. We'll figure. Yeah, kind of. In the movie, he came. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But he's captured and he's in the erudite base. And right before they're taking Triss to her execution, and we get this great, which doesn't really happen in the movie, to be fair. But we get this great moment in the book where they have like a sad reunion through a window, and they put their hands on either side of the glass. And I love a good window hand opposite sides of the glass moment in a movie, and I was disappointed that it wasn't in the movie.
So the way that Peter fakes Triss's death is slightly different in the book and the movie. It's pretty similar, but it's similar, but slightly different.
I mean, the main difference being that in the book, she's literally being put to death.
Yeah.
In the movie, she's not. They're doing more simulations, and she just dies, or seemingly.
But I just want to say that in the book, I read it and I was like, okay, I understand how he did this. Whereas I thought the movie's explanation felt like a little more like glossed over. Like it was a little more like hand wavy, like don't think about it too much.
Yeah, they definitely go into more detail in the book. He explains that he died he got a vial of the paralytic serum and dyed it to look like a murder serum or whatever, death serum or something like that. And then he applied like faulty heart monitor to her,
switched the wires out or something like that.
He goes through and there is more involved. Because you definitely do wonder, like in the movie, like, okay, so the paralytic thing, sure, but like I don't like you. She's hooked up to all these machines, and did Peter like hack the machine somehow to make it appear like she's dead? Or
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, and they never really explained that. I guess he could have done something to apparently make the machines look, because that's what he does in the book essentially. So it's assumed maybe he did something similar, but yeah, it's not really explained. My biggest note about that I'll talk about later. I just don't understand what. Anyways, we'll get to it.
The movie also skips because they don't actually escape from erudite here in this scene in the movie.
No.
But they do in the book. They like leave and they go elsewhere, and they escape by going through the trash chute.
Yes, they literally go out the trash.
Classic trope. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. And it's like with the incinerator where they burn the trash or whatever. Yeah. There's a little detail and this again is not in the movie because we don't leave the erudite headquarters and then plan another attack on erudite. We just do it all at once. But in the book, they leave and they go back and they're hanging out at Abnegation to figure out what to do next. And like everybody is there, including Marcus and Evelyn, and the factionless are there as well now too. And I love the little detail that Evelyn kicks Marcus out of their old house so that she can live in it, because it was both of their houses, and it's her turn now because he's been living in it for the past 8 years or whatever, however many years.
Yeah.
And so it's her turn to use the house now, and I just thought that was funny. There's also a little thing where when they're during this, where they're all kind of meeting back up, waiting and planning their next thing, where Edward confronts Peter because Peter has now escaped with Triss and Tobias. He confronts Peter in like the dining hall or something, and he threatens him with a fork, which I thought was funny because Peter stabbed him with a butter knife, obviously. Yeah. Anyway.
This isn't like a good thing about the book necessarily, but it made me laugh when I read it. And then it's not in the movie. It's this incredible, I think, unintentional burn on the factionless, and they're all like gathered around. And Triss is thinking about, and she's like, I can't believe that all of these people can just like be in a room together and get along. And then she thinks to herself, the only common ground they have is failure.
Triss is
amazing.
Kind of a shit.
10 out of 10.
Triss does kind of suck.
I have to question if Veronica Roth understood what she was saying in that moment.
I think she did, because I think that we're not quite to the point where Triss has accepted what the factionalists are. Like she hasn't come to view them as just people yet. I think, like, I don't know. Yeah. So I think that is supposed to be seen, at least as I read it, it was supposed to be seen as a failing of Triss to see them that way, I think. But I could be wrong. Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. If not, that's rough.
It just felt like when I read it, it felt so glib to me, and like it didn't feel like the text was drawing my attention to that as a point or like as a moment in Triss's character arc.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
But it's kind of an incredible burn.
It is for sure. There's a little detail in the book that I enjoyed, that the erudite have little James Bond gadgets. Really only 2. I was expecting more, but it's they're gonna go break into erudite again, and some of the erudite who have defected and are helping our protagonists are like, well, we have these gadgets, and one of them is a thing that like shatters glass and emits like a super high frequency to like shatter glass. And then they also have like essentially a stun gun, like a non-lethal like stun gun taser type thing. That neither of those appear in the movie, but I thought it would have been fun because who doesn't love a little gadget?
My last note here, even though it was not well written, I could not
disagree more than this. Actually, okay, maybe.
I have to mourn at least a little bit the potential of the latter scene.
I will agree with that.
Because I think that could have been a fun movie scene if done competently.
I would agree with that. Okay. If done competently, I think that scene could have worked. I had so many problems with that scene in the book.
It was terribly written.
It is one of the worst written, like, handful of pages of action I've ever read. I was blown away how poorly described and in just ill conceived the whole thing was. I was blew my mind. I can't wait to talk about it in our next section. What a segue. That's all we had for better in the book. It's time now to talk about what we thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I really enjoyed opening on the propaganda video from Janine that kind of gives us a little recap, refreshes us on what's going on and what has been going on. And there's a little detail that it's not come from the book to my memory of Janine basically claiming that the attack on abnegation was like a false flag attack by the Divergent.
Yes.
Like they're responsible for it. I don't remember that being the case in
No, I don't think
book.
they do that in the book. I thought that was really interesting. And I also liked that kind of resolved the issue of like
what are the other
what
factions?
what are the other factions think of that? And also like we come back to like where the remaining members of abnegation are throughout the book. And there's like a moment at the end with Marcus that I was like, how would this even work? Because abnegation is supposed to be all like in hiding. But I thought this kind of solved that.
Yeah, no, I thought it was definitely a good little addition.
I liked that in the movie, I got more of a sense that they were actually like living among the Amity. Whereas in the book, I felt like they were just kind of squatting.
Yes.
And I liked the sense of not being exactly sure just how much time has passed.
I would agree.
Because when we get to them in Amity, it's like it could have been days, it could have been weeks. We don't know.
Yeah. Boy, this is it's another detail that is similar to our compliments for 50 Shades.
Yes.
It's like, don't tell us how much time it has been since things happened. Helps so much. But no, I had the same thought. And in particular, there's a little moment where Tobias is like hanging out and playing with like the little kids and like pushing them on the swing. And I enjoyed just seeing them kind of like existing for a bit, like you're saying, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought it added a lot to kind of just the whole ambiance of the world.
And it was nice to see Tobias doing like a normal human thing as well.
Again, and similar to 50 Shades, the Tobias in this movie is a much more realistic human being.
A little more fleshed out.
A little more fleshed out, normal human being, and not the weirdo that he is in the book.
The movie skips a little moment where Caleb kind of tries to be like, he like to Tobias, like, that's my little sister. You better be good to my little sister.
To be fair, he does raise at least a somewhat valid point. He's like, isn't she a little young? I mean, now to be fair, they're only like
2 years apart. But also, I would like, what are you gonna do, Caleb? Like, really? Like, what are you gonna do? But also, I wanted to bring this up because I don't think it's ever mentioned anywhere in the series.
I don't think it is.
But Caleb and Triss have to be twins, right?
Yes. Barring some crazy birth circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not impossible
because
for two people to be born in the same year.
They tell us in the first book that they do the choosing ceremony when you're 16. And they do the choosing ceremony at the same time.
Yeah.
So they have to be twins, right?
They have to be twins, or I guess there could be some weird medical thing that's slightly different. Or it is, I think, technically possible if one of them were born in like January.
Right. And then their
the other
mom
one was born in like December.
Pregnant again, like immediately.
Like, it is like technically possible, but very unlikely, like way more likely that they would just have been twins. But I do agree that I don't think it's ever mentioned in the book that they are. So,
or maybe Caleb got held back a year.
Maybe. You never know. The movie cuts a thing that I thought was kind of silly. Some of the faction stuff in the book just comes across as silly. And this is one of those where Amity, it is revealed, just kind of like talks until they magically all agree eventually on whatever to do, which is why they don't have like a leadership hierarchy or whatever. And I was like, all right, sure.
Which, I mean, I'm sure that's a lot easier to do when everybody is microdosing drugs all the time.
True, yeah. And it's a pretty small, they're like a commune side, they're not like a huge amount
They're
of
the
people.
dirty hippies of
They
this
are.
universe.
They're very much like the socialist commune, or whatever kind of deal going on. But yeah, it felt like, all right.
Yeah. I don't know.
The same way I feel about all the faction like little things where it's just like, oh, okay, the erudite wear fake eyeglasses. Sure. Oh, okay.
That scene also felt to me like Veronica was trying to do a weird, like, clunky little dunk on democracy.
I think either that or more specifically, like on like the very like hippie passive, like let's all just get along kind of passivity. Like I think it could even be that, maybe more so than democracy necessarily, but I could see either.
I was thinking of that specifically because there is a moment where Triss is like, how do they even get anything done if everybody has a voice? That's not efficient.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right.
But it's always hard to tell because I don't know how much we're supposed to agree with Triss necessarily at any given moment. Like sometimes it feels like we definitely are, and other times I'm like, I don't know. Like because
not sure.
She's definitely going on a journey and learning things and growing. So like, some of the stuff she voices is not, we're definitely probably not supposed to like just agree with necessarily. But it is hard to tell because she is the protagonist, and sometimes you can tell we are supposed to like identify and agree with her. So yeah, I don't know. The movie cuts another thing that was similar to a moment from the first book that I thought was really weird because it's just fascinating to me how uninterested in learning literally anything Triss and Tobias are. There's this moment where, at Amity, they farm and they use hydroponics. They call them aquaponics in the book, but whatever, like hydroponics, aquaponics. And Ford mentions the term aquaponics, and Triss is like, aqua what? And Ford goes, you don't want to know. And I'm like, what? Why not? It's such a strange...
Well, and it's weird.
It's particularly weird because Triss is erudite.
Yeah, she tested
one of her
for
factions.
erudite. Yeah. She should be more like curious and wanting to learn. But
yeah, but it's just every time that it reminded me of the moment with the solar car from the first one where I'm like, she's like, I stopped listening immediately because I don't care. I'm like, why not? It's like, it's just such a strange... Yeah, this is interesting to me. So, getting into some big changes that, and this movie does have quite a few big changes. I did in the prequel episode, I mentioned that there was an IMDb trivia fact that said the plots are almost nothing alike.
Yeah.
It's a very loose adaptation, and I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that at all.
It's an adaptation for sure. They changed things, but it is not. I would not describe it as a loose adaptation. No. There are some big changes here and there, but overall, especially for the first three quarters,
it's not like they did a complete overhaul of the plot. Like they made some bigger changes, but they're all very like normal screenwriting changes that we see all the time.
Yeah, I thought it was very strange that I read that. That's just, again, people in the IMDb trivia section for this book series just like arguing and like complaining and like being weird. But yeah, anyway, but one of the big things is that they set up in the movie this MacGuffin, which they set up in the book. The MacGuffin is some information. There's this mysterious information that Janine stole from Abnegation, and we're worried she's going to destroy it, so we got to get to it.
Real quick, can you define MacGuffin for everyone who doesn't know?
Oh, so MacGuffin is a film term generally, which is just, and I don't know what the technical definition is, but it is an object of desire that you don't know what it is. But it is a thing that your protagonists and often antagonists are trying to acquire. I believe it specifically comes from some movie where it was literally a MacGuffin or something, like, or a character. I can't remember where it comes from. But the idea is there's some mysterious thing that the characters want, and we don't know what it is. Usually we find out what it is ultimately. Sometimes we don't. A very classic example of a MacGuffin is the briefcase from Pulp Fiction. That is like the quintessential film school example of MacGuffin. There are other ones. I believe the Maltese Falcon would be another one. But there's lots of them. So anytime in a movie where there's something that the characters want, but you don't really know what it is or what it does, it's not a MacGuffin if it's like, okay, we want the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
That's not a MacGuffin. I mean, you could maybe make an argument, but in general, we know what that is. We know why they want it. They want it because it has this power they think it has the power to like make their army invincible or whatever. Or in another Indiana Jones movie, Last Crusade, getting the cup of Christ, whatever. What is the Holy Grail?
Yeah.
Getting the Holy Grail is not a MacGuffin because we know what it is. Like, we understand what it is and why people want it. But if it's something where we don't know what it is or why the characters want it necessarily, or there's more mystery around it, that is, and there's probably a more technical definition of MacGuffin. That's just how I've always understood it. So,
editing Bryan jumping in here to say that technically, I looked it up. A MacGuffin is just any item that characters are going after. So technically, one of the items referenced on, or actually two of the items referenced on like the Wikipedia for MacGuffin are the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail from the Indiana Jones movies. I've always interpreted it more as a thing that's like either mysterious or insignificant and not like, okay, we got to go get this very specific, powerful thing that we know what it is. But I could see the argument that it's still a MacGuffin. Your mileage may vary. I don't know. The language evolves.
I really like the setup of the MacGuffin in the movie because both the book and the movie kind of have it. It's just in the book, it's more nebulous. Again, it's just like this information.
Yeah, it's like it's a secret.
Yes.
It's not an object. It's a secret information of some sort.
Which is fine. I don't mind that. And I can even see the argument that making it a literal object feels like cheap and easy, like making it this thing that they need to acquire. But I actually do prefer it in this instance. We find out in the movie, they say at the beginning, inside is a message from the founders that will ensure the future we deserve, I believe is what Janine says about it at one point, and that she needs a Divergent to open it.
Yeah.
So the thing I like about this is it gives us very concrete goal, very concrete like direction that the book just completely lacks to me. The book leaves it almost too nebulous, and I felt myself scrounging for like purpose reading the book of like, okay, I know there's some secret, but I know literally nothing about it, and everybody just talks about it in complete like in complete vagaries all the time. And it's like, okay,
and there's all these other like goals going on around it as well that really like makes things feel scattered.
Yeah, it just muddles everything up. And in the movie, it's like, okay, I understand. There's this box. They want to open it. We don't know what's in it. Sure, that's still a mystery, but there's this thing that they want to open for some reason. Janine thinks it's going to like ensure the future we deserve. She thinks it's going to have some way to do like destroy the Divergent or like control the Divergent or whatever. But she wants it. And the Divergent can open it. Yeah. Cool. Great. Makes sense. In the book, she has the information. But she's just holding on to it.
Yeah, she's just like keeping it. And they want to know what it is.
They want to know what it is. But Marcus knows what it is.
Yeah.
So why couldn't he just tell? I guess people wouldn't believe if he just said what it was. That's the other thing is like, I like in the movie, nobody knows what's in there. It's like a true mystery to everybody. In the book, Marcus, Janine, everybody like knows this information already, except we don't know what it is, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
And so
and it's frustrating too. Additionally, I think because I think in the hands of maybe a more competent storyteller, writer, you could have made a really interesting kind of analogy with like adults withholding information from like teenagers, younger people. Yeah. But that is not what happens in this book.
No.
And the MacGuffin box here, it's not the most elegant solution. It's not the most clever or mind-blowing solution.
It's definitely not.
But it is a hell of a lot more digestible than what the book does.
It is easy, but sometimes you do that. Like, that's fine. I was okay with it. Like I said, I could normally see myself being like, well, you just made it a little magic box they need to open. I could see myself criticizing
if it had been done competently in the book, we would be criticizing it right now.
Yes, that is true. If it had been done well in the book, I'd be like, ugh, all right. But since the book is such a mess, it's just like, yeah, fine, make it a magic box. I'm fine with it being a magic box. I don't care. My only caveat to that is, like I said, I do like it, but I don't love that the way to open it is passing sims of all 5 factions. One, because we have had no implication or indication in the book or the movies that the other factions have sims that they do. We talked about this in the last one, that like the sims are specifically a part of the Dauntless initiation. They do fear simulations. And we talked about how in Candor, they don't do simulations. They do the truth serum test. And in Erudite, they do, like
they
some
do
sort
like
of
an intelligence test of some kind.
Test or whatever. And blah, 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 that kind of thing. And so the fact that there's like multiple whatever, it's not, I don't hate it. And my biggest thing, I was like, whatever. I just think it's a little dumb, that simulation thing. I wish there would have been a way, like, I will say, I think it works narratively. Mm-hmm. It just feels like it kind of comes at it, like the explanation is like,
well, I think it's supposed to be a connection to the choosing ceremony sim. Right, where they're like, and that they're eliminating factions.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, you're right. I honestly forgot.
But
about
I think
choosing.
Here the idea would be that she like tests positive for all the factions.
Yeah. No, that makes I can buy that. That makes sense. I legitimately just forgot about the choosing ceremony sim. No, so you're 100% correct. No, that makes me like it more. Like I said, my caveat to my caveat was that it's not any dumber than anything in the book. So like whatever. Like I don't really care, but that and you've swayed me. No, that actually makes sense. If the choosing ceremonies or choosing sim thing is part of this universe, I like this. This is your graduation. Like I guess like this is your LSATs or whatever. Like that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm right. I'm back on board. The movie cuts a conversation that I found incredibly frustrating in the book, where she's talking to Caleb about her choosing test. Speaking of it. And she's explaining her test results to him and how she had multiple factions and how she can tell that she's in simulations, but she never uses the word divergent.
Yes.
And I was so confused.
And there's another moment of that too early in the book where she's like talking about it, but like not using the word divergent.
And I was like, and I legitimately, because they hadn't said the word divergent in the book up and like through this point. And I was like, did she like decide to like go away from divert? And it's like, no, that's clearly not eventually. But I thought it was so strange because Caleb at this point, she's not keeping it a secret necessarily anymore. It's known that she is divergent, at least to the people close to her or whatever. Like it's not like a major secret that she's divergent. And so I found it very frustrating that she's talking to her brother and just won't say that she's divergent.
I know, it was very strange.
And I guess unless the idea is that he literally wouldn't know what that means. But we because later in the book, it's brought up and they're talking about how I know some of you haven't even heard of Divergence until today. But some people had heard of it, and it's complicated. We talked about this in the last one, but I like the movie's version in the first movie where it's this thing people are aware of.
Yeah, it's kind of like a boogeyman
thing or whatever.
So in both the book and the movie, Triss and Peter eventually get into a fight while they are in Amity. And I liked the way that this played out in the movie so much better.
Yeah.
Where he's like taunting her about her parents. And it's not about a hard drive that ends up being completely meaningless.
Oh my God. We talked about this at the end of the last one when they didn't bring that hard drive with them and it wasn't mentioned. I was like, I bet that means it doesn't matter.
And lo and behold, it doesn't.
Yes, I agree completely. I had the same note, especially because, like I said, the drive ends up, she just destroys it.
Yeah.
Eventually when Erudite shows up because she doesn't want them to get it back. It's never mentioned again. There is some mention. So the whole reason she was keeping it, one of the reasons is revealed in this, that she was keeping it was because it's like the last record of her parents, which was very confusing to me to begin with, because I thought it was just the simulation data.
I thought it was the simulation data as well.
It's like the program that ran the simulation for the Dauntless.
I thought they took it to like be able to prove that Erudite did this.
Exactly what I thought. Or like either prove or like use it to like reverse engineer like a software, like an app to like stop it, or you know what I mean? Like I thought they were going to do something with it. But no, she says she wants it because it's like the record of her parents' actions. I'm like, wait,
I read that and I was like, is it?
Is it? Like what? So it has like all of the security camera footage or something? Like it just made no sense. And I was like, what? But then also, and then again, that's not even brought up again after she destroys it. And then I feel like it's also implied later or at some other point in this book, I could have swore there was an implication that Erudite also just had records. And of course they would. Why wouldn't they? Like they had like their security footage and stuff of the attack and everything.
And they're the faction that keeps everything.
Yeah. I know. I just again the whole thing with the hard drive was just the clumsiest nothingness. And I think the idea is like, oh, she's got to like get over. This is a moment of her getting over and letting go of her parents. Like she's got to destroy this thing. Like I get kind of emotionally what they're going for, but it just makes no sense narratively, and it's just so clumsy. And so I appreciate them getting rid of that because in the book that's why Peter takes it and that's why they fight, and I prefer him just taunting her about her family being dead because he is an asshole. So
I liked in the movie that when Erudite and the traitor Dauntless show up in Amity, we just see their extreme pacifism and neutrality just like immediately backfire on them.
Yes,
which I feel like we don't really get in the book. I also thought that Peter just immediately ratting them out worked so much better.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I had the same note. I have him immediately turn on them. He's like, hey, they're up here.
Yeah.
And because he kicks off that whole action scene. In the book, they're just like, they try to blend in.
Yes.
But they're just immediately discovered.
Yeah, because of course
they are. And Tobias just starts shooting everybody. And I'm like, okay. Right. Like, what was the point of like hiding for like a second only to be immediate? It just felt like it's like she didn't know what to do. She's like, they try to hide. And okay, they're immediately discovered. And it's like, well, what? Okay. So have Peter be like, hey, he like gives them up, and it makes perfect sense. Great change. I also like that in this scene, I think in the book it takes place later at night, maybe. But in the movie it takes place, it's light out, and maybe it does in the book too, I'm not sure. But they see what happens as they're running away. They know what happens to Peter because he gave them up, but they see Marcus get like captured inside. Yeah. He's like in the meeting room and he gets like rifle butted and arrested or whatever. And they see like the rest of the people that were with them get captured as they're running away. In the book, it's so confusing. They're like running away and they hear gunshots or something. And then like all of a sudden it's just the four of them. And they're like, oh, I guess everybody else died.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Right. And now it kind of works in the, like, it was dark and chaotic, or if it was dark, like we're running and there's gunfight. Like, we don't know what happened. We just ran and the four of us got away or whatever. It kind of works in that sense. But to me, based on the rest of the action scene writing in this book, it felt less intentional and more indicative of Roth's clumsy action writing to me. I'm just like, what happened? They're okay. Now that's just four of them, and the other ones are just they're maybe dead, they're maybe not. I'm like, well, they're surely not dead. Like they wouldn't just randomly kill Marcus and these important characters like completely off screen, so to say. It's just a weird. Movie's version is way better.
Yeah, and I thought having them just escape by just getting on the train and kind of butting those two things closer together worked really well.
I don't remember what they did in the...
They get out of Amity and like back through the fence, and they're like, then I think they hear the train and they're like, okay, let's get on the train.
Oh, so they make the train is like the climax of the action scene.
The train is the climax of the action scene in the movie.
Yes, that's how they get away. Kind of like get away and then find the train. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I also like that Triss starts the fight with the factionless on the train. Oh, I'm mixed on this. So it feels way more indicative of what the book is going for, where there's this recurring thing in the book where it's implied that Triss is being very reckless. This is your book 2 of your YA romance series, so of course the female lead has to be very reckless. I couldn't help but get big Bella in New Moon vibes, or not New, whatever the second one is.
Yeah, it's New Moon.
Okay. But she's supposedly being very reckless in the book because Tobias keeps criticizing her for being very reckless. We'll talk more about this later. But in this moment, she starts the fight with the factionless on this train in the movie. They're like, it seems like things are going to calm down, and Tobias is like, all right, let's all calm down.
Let's all take a breath.
Triss punches a person or something, or pulls a knife, or I don't remember what she does, but she starts the fight. I will say that the movie kind of immediately drops the Triss being reckless threat. Like that doesn't continue in the movie, but I was like, oh, okay, this is actually an instance of her like starting
actually
some
being
nonsense.
reckless.
Yeah, like she started a fight with like 50 people. Like what the heck? Again, it doesn't really go anywhere in the movie, but it's at least something compared to what happens in the book. And in this scene, the movie actually motivates Caleb's turn back to Janine.
Oh my God. Hallelujah.
Holy cow. That it is completely unmotivated in my opinion in the book.
Yeah,
like, it just comes out of nowhere.
It's a plot twist for the sake of a plot twist.
Absolutely. He's just surprised he's working for Janine. I'm like,
and I am
what?
surprised. I'm evil.
Okay. I literally to the point where I didn't believe it, and I was like, well, he's clearly a triple agent. Like he's clearly
or he's like under a simulation or something.
I assumed for sure that he was undercover, like he went back in to like, I want to work for you again, Janine, but he was really like snooping, and especially because we find out there's a line later in like after she's been talking to Caleb, I think Tobias mentions to her, like Tobias is in there with her. He mentions to her, we have some of our people on the inside got some information or something. I'm like, oh, it's Caleb. I was like, obviously it's Caleb. Like that's who he's talking about is Caleb. But it's not. And I'm like, what? Makes no sense. But the movie motivates this because during the scene, she starts this fight and they have to defend themselves. And Caleb ends up having to like beat a dude with a lead pipe. We don't know if to death or just to severe injury, or it seemed like to death.
To at least pass out.
Probably to death. And he like clearly can't handle that. Yeah. And and then Triss ends up getting like tackled and he can't do anything. And I just felt like very clearly like she put him in this situation and he's not built for this. And he's like, I can't do this. And I was like, oh, okay, I buy this. It's so frustrating compared to the book where it's just like, oh, surprise, he's bad. What? Okay.
They do eventually get to the factionless sector, which in the book they say that they have like multiple safe houses around the city. And what we see in the movie is like this underground, like kind of like a grime punk looking.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool looking.
It's like multi-layered and there's like these pipes.
Like I feel like it's not a super unique.
No.
But it is a cool set piece.
I thought it was very cool. And it's similar-ish to what is described in the book, although the book is not, there's not nearly as much detail. It's not described nearly as cool. So yeah, I liked the way the factionless base or whatever looked in the movie a lot. Yeah.
I liked that the movie truncated a little bit the reveal of Evelyn being Tobias's quote unquote dead mother.
Yeah. And the book also does not, or the movie also does not include the fact that we find out that Triss literally went to Tobias's mom's funeral, which again made her not knowing Tobias make even less sense. Again, maybe he was I think he was supposed to be pretty young. Like it's been years, like it's been, so he was considerably younger. So maybe, but you would know his name, and she has no reaction when she finds out his name in the first book. No. It's just like, what is happening?
I loved a little moment in the movie when they have dinner with his mom, and they get into an argument, and Tobias storms off, and Triss goes after him, and then Caleb is just like awkwardly sitting there and is like, "This food is great."
Yes, that was a fun scene. He's like, really tasty, good food, and she's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Yeah. And then there's a subtle change of when they're leaving to go to Candor. Caleb splits off and he's gonna go his own way, and in the book he says like there's another character named Susan who's there who he's like friend / wants to date.
Like a friend of theirs in Abnegation.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, Susan wants to go back to Abnegation and I'm gonna go with her or whatever, and they're like, okay, fine. But in the movie they change it where he's like, he actually like voices hesitancy. He's like, I'm not cut out for this whole revolution thing. Like, and then she's like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, well, maybe I'll go back to Abnegation. He says maybe. And it's like, again, I can just already buy him rejoining Erudite like a lot more than I ever could have in the book. It's not even close.
And his speech is like, maybe a little on the nose. Yeah. But it worked so much better to motivate his character choices and his heel turn.
Yes, absolutely.
So the factionless, we mentioned this in our Divergent episode, the factionless are barely in the first movie.
Yes.
But I thought that the lore at least was a little more consistent across. Veronica's lore in the books, her factionless lore is inconsistent.
Yes.
In the first book, she tells us that they do like the shit jobs that nobody wants. Like they do like the cleaning and the sewers and whatever, I guess. And she says that like we provide them with food and housing and whatever, but it's like barely enough to live on. But then now in this book, it seems more like they were like just starving and homeless without like prior to abnegation giving them charity.
I must have missed that.
So like which is it?
Interesting.
Like are they incredibly poor, or do they literally have nothing? Do you see what I'm saying?
I actually don't, but I'm sorry, because to me it's a little more complicated because the lore we get in the first book is not accurate.
Yeah.
Because it's just Triss's perception of what the factionless are. We don't actually know for sure what their whole deal is, but we actually find out they're not as destitute as anybody thought. There is some weird implication of like, and even in the movie, they talk about like, Caleb is like, well, we were giving you food and clothes. And I'm like, well, okay, but did they need it? It doesn't seem like they needed it in the movie. It seemed like they were fine. Like they had their own thriving,
I don't know,
like, you know, economic system and everything going on. It seemed like they had their whole thriving little ecosystem. So I didn't even know how much they needed the other factions like support necessarily. But yeah, I don't know.
I guess my question about the factionless within the world of the books is that like I feel like initially we're told that when you're factionless, you go and you live like on the outskirts of society, but you still like have like a job and somewhere to live. You're just like, you're like at the way bottom of the totem pole. But then later on, it seems more like when you become factionless, you're just abandoned like literally entirely.
Completely. I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and that does seem a little...
Like, to me, there's a distinction there.
No, there definitely is. Yeah, you're right. Because I definitely initially in the first book got the idea that, they're like trash collectors and janitors.
Like maintenance workers
and whatever, like, they consider like the, low skill, whatever jobs. But then later it does feel like, oh no, actually they're literally like, they don't do anything. We just give them food or something. Like they don't do any job. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway. I'm not sure either.
That was just the thing that like annoyed me. I also have to read another Veronica line here real quick because this also cracked me up. This is also when they're like in like all gathered together and they're like having a meal together, and Triss is like, the factionless are supposed to be scattered, but they're together like a faction.
Yep.
Okay.
Somebody explain to this woman what a community is.
And like, I get it. But spelled out, it's so silly.
Yeah. A little change, but I like in the movie Christina not knowing what happened to Will, where in the book she knows that he's dead, but she doesn't know like what happened to him. She just knows that he's dead. Whereas in the movie, she's like, hey, she talks when she meets Trish. She's like, oh my gosh, hey, how are you? Do you know what happened to Will? Have you seen Will or whatever? And it amplifies the lie that Triss has to tell, but also I think it just makes more sense because like, how would Christina know what happened to Will?
Yeah,
like he got killed in this shootout. Like they had to run away and like I just don't know necessarily how she would even be aware that Will was dead. She would know he's missing, obviously, but like I don't know how she would know he was dead necessarily. So I thought it just made sense for her to be like, I don't know what happened to him, and then the reveal that Triss killed him.
Yeah. The movie does like a little bit of moving things around here that I thought made a lot of sense. In the book, Triss lies to Christina about Will like immediately after finding out that she's going to have to take truth serum, which is just like a catastrophically bad idea.
I didn't remember that.
I feel
that
like
order of events.
But the movie just moves the lie to before she finds out about the truth serum.
Which definitely makes more sense that you would tell that like that. Yeah. I like the change that Candor is just going to turn them into whatever the council is what they call it, which I assume is just like a collection of leaders from the different factions to be tried for their supposed crimes. But Tobias is like, look, if you do that, and both of them are like, if you do that, we're going to die. Janine's just going to kill us. And so Tobias talks them into trying them there by appealing to Jack's sense of supreme justice or whatever. He's like, well, you're Candor. Wouldn't you be the best people to try us or whatever? And Jack's like, well, we would, obviously. Yeah. And then so he talks them into doing the truth serum thing. And I like that it's Tobias that kind of pushes towards that. And then Triss being like, I actually really don't want to do that. Just adds some tension there that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I agree. Also, though, raising the question again of what does Candor do?
They law.
But
they lawyer.
But
did you see Jack's office? He's clearly a lawyer.
But
he's got his suit and he's got his stack of
Dauntless tries their own people.
Yes.
And
I don't know. I couldn't pretend to know. Are you kidding? I have no idea.
In the questioning scene in the movie, I liked the kind of trajectory of the questioning a lot more. I liked that they asked Triss like if she has ever harmed anyone of her own faction, rather than asking her like what her deepest regrets are. I just thought that was a little hokey in the book.
Yeah, I didn't mind it because Christina set that up in the first book. I thought she did, where she says they ask you. Maybe I'm making that up, but I could have swore, or maybe she tells her in this book. I didn't mind that like they end every one of these things by saying like, what's your deepest regret? I thought that kind of fit with like the fat weird, like they make you expose. I thought Christina in the first book said that when you do this, they make you expose like your biggest secret. So that way, like there is no more secret, like everybody. I was okay with that, but I do think it works good in the movie, the way they handled it for sure. So big one. The movie significantly shaves down the number of characters we're expected to keep track of, especially after we join up with the remaining Dauntless in the book. It's so many characters.
Oh my god. And they just keep introducing new characters too. Like we get the characters from book 1 and then they're like, and here's more characters. And here's more.
Yes.
And here's more.
Yeah. Because the book, like you said, has tons of minor characters from book 1 that I barely remembered to begin with.
Yeah.
And then it's like, surprise. Here's 8 more characters. And they all have super boring generic names. There's just like Marlene and Shauna and Zeke. And then on top of that, they have not particularly, they're not like strikingly interesting characters. Like they don't have.
Yeah, a lot of them are very, like I thought Shauna and Lynn were very similar.
Yeah.
Like I most of the time I couldn't tell them apart.
So often they're like, the other part of it is like, okay, half of them are dating half of them, and then like the other half are related, and I trying to keep track of who was related to who or dating who and why each person cared about another random minor character that I didn't care about. Like, cause a thing would happen and like the suicide scene with Marlene. And then I got to figure out, okay, who cared about Marlene?
Yeah.
Okay. So Lynn cared about Marlene, and Uriah did or didn't. I
think they were dating. So
yes.
Yeah. Uriah did care about Marlene.
No, Uriah liked Lynn, didn't he?
No.
Was it Marlene?
It was Marlene and Uriah were dating, but I think Lynn liked Marlene.
Yeah. Well, spoilers. We'll get to that. Yeah. But and so there's just this very complicated like web of like, okay, but who. And then, because then you also have to, because then it gets even more convoluted by like when Triss like not even offends somebody, but like something she does pisses somebody off. I'm like, okay, now this person's mad at her. Why are they mad at her? Oh, they're mad at her because she did something or said something or whatever with some other character. And I couldn't be bothered to keep track of all of these random characters. If any of them were interesting, maybe, but Uriah is like the most interesting of the minor characters, and he's not even that interesting. It's just like, ugh. God, I hated it so much.
I was really more than fine with skipping the whole plot point in the book where all of the Dauntless mock Tobias for being afraid of his abusive father. And then in order to stop them from doing that, Tobias beats Marcus
him in front of everybody and beats him. Yeah. It's such a weird out of nowhere scene.
What are we doing?
I was like, oh, okay. All right. And it is like the whole, I get where she's going for, because the whole thing is like, he wants to become a Dauntless leader. He needs to become a Dauntless leader so that he can convince them to team up with the factionless to do the blah, blah, blah,
so
blah,
he
blah.
has to prove himself.
So he has to prove himself, but it's just like, okay, the way he proves himself is
beating
his dad with a belt in front of everybody. It seems weird.
Yeah.
Seems very strange.
Pretty strange.
It seems like they could have done, there could have been some thing that was like a cultural thing. That, like he has to like I don't want to say challenge him to a duel, but something like that. You know what I mean? Like you could have come up with something
pistols at dawn.
Something like that is like an honor thing, like an honor culture thing that isn't just like randomly dragging him in front of it. Like it's just such a strange
No,
scene.
I think something a little more formal would have worked because Dauntless is surely an honor culture.
Yes, well, clearly, yeah. And so I think, and then you have this fun interaction where Marcus is like, well, I'm not Dauntless. I don't abide by your rules or whatever, and then there could be some drama and you could figure out this way to spin it. As is, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. You're like, why is this beating the shit out of his dad? What? Okay,
and it's just kind of a horrifying scene.
Yeah, it's just like I don't feel good about it. I don't think you're supposed to feel good about it. I don't think. Like I don't think you're supposed to. I don't think it's supposed to be cathartic.
We don't like Marcus.
No,
but the scene definitely does not come off as cathartic.
No,
like you said.
And I think that's the problem. Whereas if it had been like a more, all the issues with honor culture aside, if it had been like a more formalized thing, it would have maybe given some catharsis to like that relationship. As is, it's just like, okay, now Tobias is the bully. Cool. Like what? Yeah. Great. Now he's an asshole. Like what? It's just, not a fan. So then we get to the actual testing of Triss in the movie, and it's not really testing so much. She's got to unlock the MacGuffin.
Well, we're not there yet. This is just the first time that we see.
Triss is not there yet. We see
what Janine is up to.
What Janine is up to, which is using Divergent to try to unlock this box, and we see one of the Divergent hooked up this machine, and I thought it was a pretty cool, creepy thing.
Yeah, like these snaky, like tentacle things, like we said.
Yeah, they like dangle down, and then the Divergent, the person hooked up to him, like hangs in midair. And we'll talk more about it later when Triss gets in it, which I thought was interesting. Kind of made me laugh, but because it goes back to something we talked about in the last episode, or in the the Divergent episode. But yeah, I thought these are cool. In the book, all the testing is she's just kind of like
it's just like normal, like
one of them's like an MRI,
science, hospital medical stuff.
Yeah,
but I thought like Janine murdering her way through Divergence to try to open this box was an interesting villain arc for her.
I thought it worked. I enjoyed it.
We go like back to they're still in Candor at this point.
Yes.
And Triss is having a conversation with Uriah on the rooftop, which I thought worked. Like that worked better for me as an emotional beat than the scene from the book where Triss like goes into the
chamber where they do the truth.
Yeah, the truth testing room, and like throws the chair out the window.
Yeah, I did miss her throwing the chair out the window. I thought that was funny, but yeah.
That whole scene was just kind of like I understood what Veronica Roth was trying to do in that scene. It just didn't. It didn't do anything for me.
That's fair. That's fair. I didn't really miss it overall. I don't know. I thought it was funny that she just throws a chair out the window. Well, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But I did like that scene between her and Uriah on the roof. And I thought I liked the little detail, which I don't remember anything like this in the book, where they're having a conversation. It's very brief because stuff pops off immediately. But Uriah mentions that he thinks sometimes when he likes to come up there and look. I guess he's only been there for a little bit because he's Dauntless, but he likes to come up there and look out at the city, and he kind of thinks that sometimes he feels like he can see lights beyond the walls. even though he knows there's nothing out there. And I thought that was a fun little hint tease towards where the big reveal at the end. So then the big attack happens. The Dauntless and Erudite show up and start serum needling everybody. Although it seems like, and that was the thing that I had a little bit of an issue in the movie, it seems like they're shooting bullets at them.
Yeah, they look like bullets, but then they're like these little, like, the Wikipedia article called them discs.
Yes.
But they kind of look like BBs.
They're kind of discs in the movie. In the book, they're described as like a disc, but with a giant needle attached to it. Basically, like a what is the word? What is the there's a word for the little, like a tranquilizer dart, similar-ish kind of thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have like the big feathers on the back or whatever, but it's a thing where you shoot a dart and it injects like a thing into a person. In this instance, is injecting like serum, simulation serum into people, and but when they're shooting at them on the roof, it sounds like gunfire, but two, when she shuts the door,
it absolutely looks like bullets.
I don't know, like there's bullet holes in the door, which makes no sense for these little dart things. The only thing I can think is that maybe they have both somehow.
Yeah,
like
maybe they switched once they got inside.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the only thing that makes any sense. But they didn't switch because they shoot Uriah with one on the roof because he gets winged and we thought he gets shot, and then we realize, oh, it was the tranquilizer thing or the simulation dart thing. But anyways, so they run inside and they burst through the door and just like mow everybody down. And it seems, again, initially like they just literally just murdered all these people. But then Triss wakes up and everybody on the stairs is still knocked out. But she realizes that she feels this little thing on her back, and she has this little dart in her. And there's a similar moment that is in both the book and the movie where she's like trying to help people. They take place in different places. Originally, she's on the first floor when this all goes down, and she goes up to get people. They switched it so she's on the top floor and goes down. And in the book, she's like looking around for like other Divergent that are awake or whatever to try to help them. And she finds a little girl who's like laying on the ground pretending to be asleep or pretending to be knocked out by the simulation serum. And she's like stepping on everybody's hands to see. Anyways, it's a similar scene, and she ends up like telling this girl like run and hide. But the little girl in the movie scene, like kind of just wanders in like, Mom, what is happening? And she got hit with the dart too. And I thought it was a sweet little scene because like Trish is like, see, I got one too. And I thought it just worked really well. And I like that this little kid is not like a genius who knows to play dead, or not dead, but like knows to like
she's little.
She's little, so it makes sense that she's just kind of stumbling around, like not knowing what to do. And then I also like having her be there at the scene. She ends up getting caught. Her and Uriah try to go get some weapons or whatever, but they end up getting caught by Eric, and they get drugged to this room. And it's similar in the book where they like grab them because they know they're Divergent. Obviously, because they're not knocked out by
they're like rounding them all.
They're rounding them up to take some of them to Janine. And in the book and in the movie, they like execute. They say we don't need all of them, and they kill some people. I liked having the little girl that they established already be one of the people they round up. In the book, she's not there.
Yeah, she
gets away. We do see her later, so she seems to be fine. But I felt like it just kind of upped the stakes of that scene a little bit because it's a character we have some, I don't want to say attachment to, but it's like we've seen Triss have an exchange with this character, and it seems like Eric is going to shoot her in the head, or not seems like, he is. And I thought I was like, are they going to do it? Because in the book, Eric murders like an 11-year-old kid.
Yeah, like a little boy.
Who is Divergent. And he says like, you're not fully developed till your brain isn't fully developed to your whatever age, so you're useless or whatever, and just kills this kid. In the movie, he kills some random older guy and does it, but then he walks over to the little girl, and I was like, oh no, are they? I thought for sure they were gonna like just have her sub in for the little boy in the book who we didn't really know who it was or whatever, just to give it more impact. And I was like, whew, okay, didn't murder the little girl. I don't know if we ever know what happens to her, if we see her again later or not, but I mean, shit just pops off because they show up and save. I'm sure she's fine because after this they get.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see her somewhere really briefly at the end.
Yeah.
Like at the very end when everybody's going towards the wall.
Yeah.
But I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. So I have mixed feelings. So during the scene, they have this device, which is not in the book, that is this little scanner that they point at people, and it goes bloop, and it goes 20% Divergent.
Yeah.
50% Divergent, whatever. I have mixed feelings on this. It feels a bit cheap and easy, similar to the box, the Magic MacGuffin box.
Yeah.
But it does work well to get across what the movie is doing here. And it just makes things easier to digest. And I think most importantly, it's not like the book had a super well thought out and meticulously crafted concept of what like the Divergent are and how that works anyways. So I'm fine with this weird little device that's
the device itself is silly. Like, it looks silly.
It's a little overly complicated, I think, for what it's doing. You know, it feels a little like over design. Like, we need it to be super weird because it's like this 3D graphic pop-up thing that spins, and it just seems like they what you would do is they just have a little like
a scanner
neck
gun.
scanner, like a scanner. They would have something very simple, you would think, to do this, but whatever. It's an interesting design if it is feel a little over designed.
Yeah, but also like similar again to the box. You know, it's not the most elegant, it's not the most clever thing in the world, but it's so much more digestible.
Yeah, it's like okay,
what the book gives us.
Sure.
Because the book, I was so confused. In that whole like part where he's like, well, we don't need everybody, but we only need 2. But then later on when they were talking about it, it seemed like it was something different. I don't know.
He says we only need 2. I don't know why they only need 2. Because it seems like they would need as many as, I don't know.
Right.
Like what?
Well, and it seems to me that if Janine actually wants to learn about Divergents and figure out how to defeat them, she would want as many test subjects as possible.
And you would think you would want like little kids who aren't fully developed. That would actually seem like it would be a useful thing for learning, like, okay, well, how does it develop? What is going on here? So so again, it's cheap and simple and like a kind of a cop out, like these people are not enough Divergent for the box to open. It's like, okay, like it's tacky, or it's not even tacky. It's just kind of like whatever. But again, it works fine for what the movie's doing, and it streamlines something that is convoluted and not well explained or explored in the book anyway. So it's like, okay, I'm okay with it. So as we mentioned, Triss starts running around helping everybody, trying to help people and find and save people that are Divergent and like get them to safety or whatever, even though she knows like the Dauntless and the Erudite, or well, specifically the Erudite Dauntless, the traitor Dauntless, are running around inside, and if she gets caught, she could get killed. After Tobias rescues her, and it turns out, you know, they got warned. In the book, they got warned by like Will's older sister who defected from Erudite. In the movie, I don't remember how they show up. They just whatever. They stage a resistance and are able to defeat the Dauntless that were in there. And then in the book, Triss and Tobias have this conversation where he gets very mad at her for like helping during the attack. He's like, well, she's like, well, Eric almost killed me. And he's like, well, where did that happen? And she's like, well, by the elevators, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, weren't you shot in the lobby? Or didn't you get like knocked out in the lobby? And she goes, yeah. And then I went and blah, blah, blah. And he's like very upset.
Yeah, he's like mad at her.
That she didn't he's like, why didn't you just run away? And I'm like, wait, what about her makes you think she would do that? He's like chastising her for being reckless. But I'm like, I don't think what she did was that. I mean, it's sure, it's like, probably not what I would do because I'm not a super brave but I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just like, it's not even that it's not like she was like, oh my god, we're under attack, I gotta do something, and tries to help. Like, it's a very reasonable response. Like
this element in the book drove me absolutely insane because everyone keeps saying that Triss is being reckless, and somebody says at one point that she's been like acting psychotic.
Yeah.
But I almost never felt like she was outwardly acting that much different than she did in the first book.
I didn't think so either. And they're dauntless. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I agree. I was like, well, you were attracted to her because she was like brave and, you know, fearless and blah, 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 and all these things. Like, it just, and I get what we're doing is like, the idea, you know, he wants to protect her because he cares about her and all that sort of stuff, but it just doesn't add up because again, if she were being which is why I liked the moment in the train where she like starts a fight with all these people. It's like,
and that's actually reckless because she was putting herself and them in danger for no reason.
Yeah,
this is not reckless.
No, not at all. It's dangerous, but that is different than like reckless. I drove me crazy, and I was really glad the movie cut that all out. I was like, this just makes no sense. Movie also cuts this weird, and I had such a hard time with this. There's several scenes in a row here where I felt like people were having conversations that weren't based around the events that I had just read take place in the book that we were reading.
Yes.
And I was like, what is happening? There's this argument between Triss, Jack, and Tobias where they're having this conversation about what were the Dauntless doing here. They're like trying to figure it out.
The traitor Dauntless.
Yes, the traitor Dauntless. Like, what were they doing here? What was their plan? We don't know what they were doing here. And I'm like, well, yeah, we do. And specifically, Triss knows because Eric explicitly tells her what they're doing there.
Yes.
He's like, as you said, we got to take 2 Divergent back to Erudite for testing, and we're going to kill the rest of them. They don't know I guess they don't know their entire plan for being there, but that is enough to know what they were there for. And also, Kander has Eric captive in the book and questioned him with truth serum. Why is there any... And they do say in the book, like, oh, he doesn't know that much about the plan. But he knows why they were there.
He knows enough
he knows
for them to understand the point of them breaking in.
Yeah. He would have to know enough of that, and otherwise he couldn't do what he was doing there. It makes no sense. And they're like creating this drama and this tension around like the mystery of what they were doing there. And I'm like,
it's not a mystery.
What they were doing there. It was so frustrating. And then in the scene after that, they're then having this conversation about like what to do about it and all this sort of stuff. And he, at one point towards the end of the conversation, he's like, look, we need to, maybe they came in, it wasn't that violent. Obviously they didn't kill most of us. So maybe we can like talk to them, Erudite, and like figure out something, have a parlay. And Triss is like, what do you mean it wasn't violent? And he responds by saying like, I can't launch an attack based on a little girl's speculation. But I went back today as we were doing these notes and reread. Nobody had suggested attacking anyone.
Yeah.
Up until that point of him saying that. Triss has been arguing that the Erudite Dauntless people are dangerous, like, and that they have it out for the Divergent, but she hasn't been like, we have to go get them, we have to like, she's not like calling for war or whatever necessarily. And Jack like refuses to acknowledge that the Dauntless and Erudite team are even dangerous, let alone and he calls it a peaceful invasion. Like I said, he's just like an idiot. I
don't know. This whole section made me wonder because we know I mentioned in the prequel that there were draft inconsistencies in this book when it got published, because publishing team, author, they didn't go back and do a check and do like a specific check for draft inconsistencies. And I wonder if this was one of those places, like maybe there was a different draft where Triss was trying to convince them to move on Erudite, and then that got taken out, but this didn't get taken out. I don't know.
It felt wild to me because you were talking about that, and I was like, but it seems so weird to me because this particular scene, I understand those draft inconsistencies more, you know, if they're like things further apart. But I'm not saying it can't happen. But like this is stuff. It's like over the course of like a handful of pages. There's like it feels like like we're having multiple different conversations about events that happened differently than. This was very strange, and it was very frustrating for me to read.
I don't know. I honestly, having read this book now, I feel bad for the editing team.
Yeah.
Because I could not imagine having to edit something like this and to keep track of all of these details and all of the characters and the plot points. And
it would have been tough for sure. It would have been definitely an ordeal. But yeah, I liked that the movie made Jack not quite as much of an idiot. Like he seems like a guy who's loyal to his faction and has like eccentricities related to the fact that he's candor, but he doesn't seem like a complete idiot.
Right?
Like
yeah. No, in the book he was just stupid.
Yeah,
just, like a peaceful invasion. What are you talking about?
They shot an 11-year-old in the head.
They came into your home and murdered a child.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
It's never revealed that Jack is like secretly covering. You know what I mean? Like it'd be one thing if like, oh, it's revealed Jack is actually like
he's in Janine's pocket or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be one thing to like, he's trying to like paper over this and try to like, but that's not the case. He's just an idiot. Like apparently just an idiot. And it's wild.
So when we find out in the book that Peter is back with Janine, there's a little moment where Triss is like, I wonder how he got this like top job working as her like personal bodyguard or whatever. And I don't think the book ever actually answers that.
I don't think so. No, he's just with.
But the movie answers it.
Yeah, I thought this was good. Yeah.
And we find out that Peter is the one who helps Janine come up with the plan for the suicides to flush Triss out.
I will say that it muddies things a bit because he does get the face turn, and it's not a full face turn. It's a very selfish, like...
Yeah, it is.
But he does become, like, a fun, jokey companion at the end. Like, you know what I mean? Like, which is a little weird for a guy who came up with the plan of, like, have 3 people kill themselves every day. Now, like we said, we don't know for sure he came up with that specific plan. What he did in the movie that we saw is he said... You got to hit her where it hurts her, which is like she's very like her heart or something like that. Like she's very selfless.
Exploit the abnegation.
Yes, exploit the abnegation in her. We don't know if he comes up with this specific plan.
True.
But either way.
That could have been somebody else's brilliant idea.
Yeah. So this felt like it had to be a draft inconsistency or something because this drove me nuts. And the movie corrects this.
We stopped the movie and talked about this for like 10 minutes.
Well, because it drove me insane. So in the book, when the attack happens, I'm going to try to get this as quick as possible, but when the attack happens on Candor, they specifically mention that she gets hit with the darts, or everybody gets hit with the darts, but they also shoot these gas canisters that are like, and she sees those like this mist in the air that like dissipates, and she thinks that's actually what knocks everybody out or whatever, something like that. But we don't know exactly what was going on there initially. In the movie, there's no gas canisters. They just shoot everybody with the little darts or whatever. And then and I'll explain why that's better. I also like in the movie, they have this thing where in the book, they just take the darts out immediately. And apparently the serum from the darts is just in them now forever, I guess, or whatever.
I guess.
Whereas in the movie, the dart being in them, the dart has the transmitter. And it needs to be in them, and they can't remove them because apparently it has some tech that like wraps around like the nearest artery, and if they remove them, it will like they'll bleed to death essentially. Yeah. Which I thought was clever. That is not at all in the book. But there's this nonsense in the book where they explain, and I thought I was going crazy because it makes no sense with what happens with events later. They explain that the gas, that there's 2 parts to the simulation, like inducing or whatever. There is let me see if I can find it. There's the transmitter, and then there's the serum that induces the simulation. It's 2 separate parts. And they're having a discussion after the invasion, and Tobias says they're trying to figure out like what was going on. And Tobias says, my guess is that the needle injected you with a transmitter, and the gas was an aerosol version of the liquid that alters the brain. Meaning that the gas cans they shot were pivotal or an important half of what was needed to induce the simulation. This transmitter needs to be there, and that's what the thing they shot and that injected into them. And it's the special transmitter that injected into them that doesn't like break down or whatever. Yeah. So they can do multiple simulations. But the aerosol can. Now I will give the book this. This is Tobias's kind of like speculation, but they never say no, that's not the case. It seems I'm to think we're supposed to assume that is what happened. Because otherwise they make a point of the gas and the aerosol during the attack. She makes a big point of it. So I'm like, that has to be important. But then, if that's the case, how do they trigger the simulations on people remotely later? So, like, when they're in the Dauntless HQ later, and Christina and that or whatever, when the three people go to kill themselves, they would need the gas half in order to induce the simulation.
Yeah, you would think.
That's what was explained in the book, but they do not do that.
No.
And it drove me nuts because I was like, how did you forget the rules you laid out in your own book? And now, again, the only possible out for this is that Tobias was wrong. I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
But
maybe if he was wrong, but then it's never gone back and addressed.
No.
And like, if you were going to have him be wrong anyway, why would you even put that in there?
Yeah. It's just a weird thing to include.
And like, also the aerosol spray being a version of the serum makes sense because that's what knocks everybody out. But it doesn't knock the Divergents out because they don't go into the simulation.
Yes.
So it has to be that.
Yes.
But then they don't need that later.
They don't need that later. It makes no sense. It drove me nuts. And so when the movie, again, it's a little thing, it's whatever. And you know, I normally little plot holes like that, it's like whatever. But the fact that they so explicitly go into detail about how this thing works, and then that's not how it works later, I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know how an editor, it's wild. But unless I am missing something completely, but I went back and read it again because I was like, it was making me go crazy. And the movie just fixes all that by just having the actual disc that is embedded in their arm. That's the transmitter. And when it hit them, it injected the serum, I think is the implication of what's going on. So there's no gas cans or anything like that. And that way it works. And that also makes sense because then they're susceptible as long as, and that's why they have the thing where they can't take them out because they're susceptible to being simulated or being put under simulation as long as the thing is in their body or whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought that it's so
it
much,
works so much
and the
better.
fact that they changed it makes me think that whoever was writing the script was, this doesn't make any sense. This makes no sense. And somebody decided they needed to fix it. Anyways, it drove me crazy. They also skipped the whole scene where Jack parlays with Max. We mentioned this, that Jack is like, well, we can go talk to Erudite. And so Max, who is the leader of Dauntless, technically, he's actually above Eric.
Yeah, he's the leader of the Dauntless.
The traitor Dauntless.
The
But
traitor
he was the leader of the Dauntless, period,
yes.
In the previously. And Eric was actually like under him, technically, I think. And he's in the movie. He's Mekhi Phifer plays him, I believe. But anyways, so they go and they have like a meeting, and this scene, there's so much wrong with this scene that I had issues with. But one of the big ones is that Lynn is there. Like a handful of them go. It's like Lynn, Tobias, Triss.
Yeah, they go to like spy
somebody else
and listen to what they're saying.
Like Shauna or somebody like that. And they go to like listen because they don't want to do. They're like, no, don't go talk to him. You're not gonna get whatever. And so they go and listen. And then while they're there, Lynn just at the end of the meeting just climbs up onto they're like underneath the bridge. And she like climbs up onto the top of the bridge and just shoots Max in the chest. And I think kills him. I don't think we see him again after that. Maybe we do. I don't remember.
I don't remember. Yeah,
he's in the movie.
No,
like
I think she does kill him.
I think she does.
I think she does.
And just shoots him. And I was like, look, I feel like I barely know Lynn, but where did that...
Yeah, what was the point?
What was the motivation?
And like, he didn't like say anything that I thought would particularly like...
instigate that?
Yeah.
We knew nothing about Lynn that would make her want to do that. I was like, what? Like, she's dauntless, so like, whatever. But she didn't seem blood... Like, at the end of the book, when Tori kills, spoilers, Janine... We understand why, because Janine was responsible for Tori's brother being murdered.
And Tori's out for blood. And we get that.
And Lynn has, I believe, one of her family members might have been one of the people that died. Maybe the suicide. Marlene was that it before? No, that's after this.
Yeah, that hasn't happened.
That hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then I don't know, because I was thinking, maybe
I don't know.
Marlene. But yeah, no, that hasn't happened yet. So we don't know. I was like, that seems completely out of nowhere. And my speculation was that maybe in an earlier draft of this book, that was Triss.
Yeah.
And this was an actual reckless thing that she was doing. Yes, an actual
reckless act.
And then when Veronica rewrote, because in the end of this, she has a thing about how she rewrote parts, especially parts of the early part of this, to have Triss deal with like the trauma of the last book more. And I'm wondering if the whole PTSD gun thing got added in later.
Yeah.
But she wanted to keep this scene in still.
She just swapped
the names out. So she just
out.
swapped it to Lynn. Because then what happens is that Triss runs off. She thinks she knows in this scene in the book, she knows that because Max is like relaying messaging from Janine. And so Triss realizes that Janine has to be here somewhere.
Yeah.
And because she has to be close, within like a mile or whatever. And she somehow figures out where she must be in some certain building. And so she tries to run and find Janine. And Tobias follows after her. And then Tobias gets really mad at her about being super reckless for like trying to find Janine, which I guess it's a little reckless, but it's
a little
not
more
like
reckless than the last example, but
it's still not.
But
that,
it's still like within the like reasonable.
She's like, oh, maybe we can find Janine. Maybe we can end this whole thing. Like it's a very reasonable thing. You know, because they're like, well, she wouldn't have like a ton of security probably with her, and when they see her, she only has like I think it's Peter and one other person maybe. So there's a chance they could have gotten to Janine and arrested her, killed her, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's all I can think. And then he chastises her for being super reckless, and I'm wondering if maybe that's what happened here. Is that originally Triss kills Max and then goes after Janine or something like that, and we just got rewritten because we can't have Triss use a gun. I have no idea, complete speculation, but it just felt so weird to me in the book that I thought something else had to be going on. Also, as we mentioned, Jack is an idiot. He agrees to the erudite terms, and it just makes no sense. Because in the movie, I like it a lot. Jack is like, yeah, no, after the attack, he's like, oh, clearly erudite is corrupt and evil, and we will help you, basically. Like he's like, we'll help you, and they realize they need more help, so they're gonna go get the factionalists or whatever, and that's where we end that in the movie. In the book, Jack is basically like, no, we're gonna turn you guys all over.
We're gonna agree to their terms,
every single one of their terms.
Yeah, and I really just so the terms that they give Jack are. That he's going to turn over all the Divergents, and he's going to release Eric to them, and he's also going to provide them with a list of everyone in Candor who did not get a needle implant.
Yeah.
And it drove me absolutely batshit insane because I felt like he was not at all concerned enough about the fact that Erudite wanted to know who did not get this needle implant.
Yeah.
Like that would be concerning to me as the leader of a group of people. I mean, like, why you want to know that? Why? What was it? Why do you want to know?
Yeah. At this point, you're right, because they don't know that it's like an everlasting simulation serum thing. So they don't know that. So you would think they'd be like, so why are you so interested in who got hit with that? Because if it was just like a sleep dart, why does it matter or whatever? Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like he was not nearly concerned enough about that. A couple other thoughts that I had on this scene. I think there's potentially some meaning to Jack's cowardice and him just immediately folding to erudite aggression. Like, he's not a good leader.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need that element in this story. It's interesting, but it is underdeveloped and it's not necessary.
I agree. I think it's another one of those elements of like, look, this is another bad thing about one of the other factions.
Just another
like,
example.
Look, yeah.
We get it.
Yeah.
But also, there was a line in this scene that made me lose my shit. It absolutely sent me. After our Divergent episode discussion of what the heck Candor even does.
800 lawyers or whatever. Yeah.
And during this parlay, Max says to Jack, "You're the only disposable faction."
Yes.
I was like, got him.
I mean, where's the lie? I don't know.
What did they do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that the Dauntless going back to the factionless underground city made so much more sense than them going back to the Dauntless compound.
No reason to, other than we just want to go back.
Yeah, we just want to go back there
for sentimental reasons. I did like the scene in the book where they go around with the paintball guns and shit. I thought it was really dumb.
But they nixed the paintball guns in the first movie, so
they used the paintball guns in the book to like hit all the security cameras so that erudite can't watch them. But they would already know they were there. Is the dumb thing,
right?
In order for them to to paintball the cameras. Sure, they wouldn't be able to like watch you, I guess, but they would know you were there.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. The movie also cuts this whole thing, and it's kind of mentioned in the first book, but I didn't really think much of it. But there was one particular scene in this book where I was like, that's weird. That implies like all of the factions have different foods that they eat.
Yes.
And there doesn't seem to be any reason for them to have access to different access to different foods.
No, Amity provides all the food.
Yeah.
You think there's
like why wouldn't the Dauntless have scrambled eggs? I don't understand.
Yeah, they're talking about I believe it's like Candor has ice cream.
Yeah.
Dauntless has cake.
Yeah.
Which apparently nobody else has cake. Erudite has soda, which apparently other people. I just like, what? Okay.
But for why? For what?
Because it is a very weak attempt at at creating interesting world building of being like, oh look, they're different. It's just an attempt to differentiate the factions even more and create unique things that feel. It's comparing it to something like Harry Potter with like the different houses. It's the thing of like, oh, the Slytherin common room is in the dungeons, and like it's like that kind of thing of like trying to create this unique culture around each faction, but it does, I agree, not really make sense.
It doesn't make any sense, and it just comes off as so silly. Like I feel almost like she was trying to do like, oh, different cultures have different foods.
Yes.
But like different cultures develop different foods because of lots of complex reasons.
Interlocked reasons.
Yeah.
Not when they're all food is all provided by the same people and they all live in the same place and they all like
what would be the reason to give cake to Dauntless but not anyone else? I don't understand. There's not a reason anyway.
Maybe we'll find out. Maybe I didn't have that in my predictions, but maybe in Allegiant, when they get out and they're talking to the rest of the real people, they're going to be like, they're going to talk to the architect's great-great-great-grandchildren or whatever, and the architect's great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be like, well, what did you guys think of that cake? And they're like, well, yeah, why did only Dauntless get cake? And they're like, I don't know, my grandpa was just weird. I don't know, but I don't.
I want desperately for that to happen now.
You know, it'd be great. I'm imagining now a Dauntless, a prequel to Dauntless, or to Divergent, that is just Michael from The Good Place designing the Chicago experiment.
This is the crossover we need.
Yes, it is just him designing, and it's like why they have Froyo or frozen yogurt in The Good Place. I'm just imagining that now.
We're gonna give this group cake,
or
none of the other groups.
Maybe it's
cake.
a thing where we find out that it's, and I should have done this in my prediction, but I mean, like we find out that it's kind of like Harry Potter, where each faction had like an architect or whatever, and they were like, my favorite food was cake. So like that's what Dauntless got is, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's all I can think is that we're gonna find out like the people who organized this whole thing, that they just the person who designed Dauntless liked cake. The person who designed Erudite was a big soda fan. I don't know. It's wild.
Oh, so I mentioned earlier that I really liked the change to Triss and Peter's fight in Amity. But I had questions about how that would affect his heel turn later on. Because when he saves Triss, when they're in Erudite, he tells her that it was because she saved him
at the beginning.
During
when they're escaping from Amity, she like knocks him out of the way of a bullet.
Yeah. And he's paying her back for that. But I think what the movie did works pretty well.
Yes.
Which is that,
better,
like once
honestly.
she gets there and turns herself in, actually I agree with you. I also think it works better. She initially like grabs him and slams him against the wall and like threatens to kill him. And Janine's like, oh, go ahead.
Sure, whatever.
We
have
have
lots of guards.
lots of guards here.
Yeah.
He doesn't matter.
Yeah, and in that moment, Peter's like, oh, because he wanted to be important. He wanted to be comfortable. He's very selfish. He's motivated by his selfishness. He just wanted to be secure and whatever. And so he wanted like a higher up position, and she's like, oh, no, he's just a guard, and I don't care if you kill him. And he's like, well, screw this, which I thought was great. I thought it worked great. Also, the moment right after that I thought was fantastic, and much improved version of this, where she's like, oh, you don't care if I kill him? And she turns the gun on herself, and she threatens to kill herself. And she's like, I'm pretty sure you need me to do, to get this thing open. And for a minute, Janine does seem kind of taken aback of like, oh shit, what do I do? And then Caleb walks in, and this is the reveal of Caleb as
the evil
Caleb or whatever. And I thought that was great because in the book, it's way more dramatic in the movie. Like it's because it's a great moment already, and you're like, oh shit, she's got her. What is it like? How is Janine possibly going to get out of this? And then Caleb shows up, and he's able to just walk, and she's so stunned by this that she just lets him take the gun from her, which totally works. In the book, it's just this moment where Triss is like tied, like during some tests or whatever, and literally Janine is like, I bet you've been wondering how I know so much about you. I bet you wonder how I knew you have 3 different sections on your on your aptitude test, and how we knew about this thing. It was Caleb. And I'm like, okay. Like, literally, that's the reveal in the book. And it's
she monologues.
I was like, are you kidding me? And the movie's version, way better. Way better. And you know what? I mentioned this earlier, and I was very excited about this. They actually kind of brought back the fear simulation landscape from book 1 that we joked about, how everybody watches the Dauntless Initiates do their fear test at the end, and it's just them in a big room, like, flailing around doing stuff. And in this scene, when Triss is hooked up to the simulation machine and she's hanging in midair, earlier we just saw them, they're just kind of like hanging there or whatever, and like writhing around. But she's like literally, because when we're seeing in the simulation, she's like climbing stuff. And when we cut back to the room she's in, she's literally like climbing in midair and stuff. And I was like, they did it. They brought it. Amazing. I love it.
It also reminded me a little bit of Ready Player One.
Yes. And I actually wondered if that's why they did that. I don't know the timelines on this, if it lined up, but I was like, this feels really Ready Player One.
Yeah.
I think this would have been
This would have been before Ready Player One, because we did
maybe not the book, but the movie.
No, the movie, because we did Ready Player One when it came out.
It's a 2018 film, but I'm pretty sure the book is was considerably before that.
Yeah.
It was 2011 was the book, so the book came out a few years or a year or two before this book, but it doesn't matter. I don't think. Yeah, it's just that particular moment. It was great. I loved it. I actually kind of enjoyed so first up she has to complete the Dauntless simulation or whatever. And she walks into this house, her old house, and it's like burning down and her mom's in it. And all of a sudden the house just starts flying away.
It like breaks off of its foundation
and flies away. And I was like, this is gnarly. And then as I was sitting there thinking, I was like, okay, this is actually fairly effective, like visual metaphor.
Yeah.
Because in this moment, she feels like she has nowhere. She has no home. She's foundationless. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know.
She doesn't have anything tethering her.
She doesn't have anything tethering her. And her home literally flying away. And she's like, she has this big moment where she has to dive and try to catch like a cable that's like dangling down or whatever. And it's a fun action scene too, as she's like climbing all over this building and she like swings over and inside and blah, blah, blah. I thought it was pretty fun. And it actually, like I said, it is actually, it's an okay visual metaphor. It's not like mind blowing, but I was like, all right, yeah, that works pretty well. And we mentioned it before, but Caleb buying into the erudite BS feels a lot more natural.
Oh my God, it works so much better
to me. And also like his conflict over whether he's doing the right thing or not. And maybe it's honestly probably a big part of it is that we can actually like see the performance of this person doing this, as opposed to just listening to Triss like kind of think about
we can
what
see
he's doing
like
and
his
why
expressions and the little nuances
and how he's
there.
struggling with what's going on, and it just feels way better, whereas in the book you're just like, oh, he's like evil, I guess, or maybe he's not evil, I don't know, like what's
there was a little moment in that scene with him that I loved, where Triss is in the simulation and they can see like at least parts of the simulation and as like a hologram
they can
on one of the screens. And there's this moment where their mother's face is on like taking up the whole screen, and he's just like looking over at it, like a kicked puppy.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. And you can tell it's definitely going to do something, and who knows where he'll go in the next book. But yeah. So I mentioned it earlier, but the scene where Janine is taunting her, and so she does like a handful of different, she does all the Sims, and then I think she's on Amity, which is the last
she passes all of them, but she has not done Amity yet.
Yes. And then there's this moment where she's in the Sim, and this is the one where this is where she's getting taken back. So she does the first 4, and then they're like, if we push her any further, she'll die, and we won't be able to do them. So they take her to rest for a night, and they're going to do it the next day. They're taking her there to the next day, and she sees that Tobias has been captured, and she starts freaking out. And while she's freaking out, Peter like hits her with an injection. We think some sort of like calming, whatever. And she gets drugged into the room, and they hook her up, and then Janine starts taunting her, and then we get the shaky shot. And then we realize we're in a simulation because she just bursts through the glass and like tackles Janine and then hits the ground and the whole world like explodes.
Yeah.
It's a super cool moment. I thought it was super wild. I'm not really sure what it had to do with the Amity sim, but
I can only assume that if she had actually been doing it and he hadn't like dosed her with the paralytic or whatever, that she would have had to like forgive Janine.
That, or I guess it could have been basically the lead in to what we do see when she does it later, which is Janine kind of like preps her for squaring off with herself. She's like, she's like, you have to face off with the first person you hate most. So maybe it's that. It's just the beginning part of it or something. I was a little confused. But anyway, she ends up, everything goes crazy. It's a really cool visual like moment. And then she dies, seemingly. Well, they don't say she's dead in the movie. They say she's spent, I believe. It's implied she's dead because they take her to like the morgue or whatever. Or Peter takes her to the morgue. But she seems to die. Caleb seems not that upset about it, honestly. Which was like a little, he's like, oh no, I guess. I mean, he's upset, but not that upset. And then Peter like takes her body to the morgue, and then it's revealed that when he injected her with a paralytic thing, and so that she didn't actually die, which is similar to what they do in the book, but just she's being executed as opposed to doing the simulation. And then she gets revived, and Tobias is there because he also broke Tobias out, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, he gets Tobias out like as he's taking her to the morgue.
And the two of them, and he's like, all right, we got to get out of here. Peter's like, we got to get out of here. Let's go. And Triss is like, and this is, holy shit, do I like this change so much.
Yes.
They're about to leave, and Triss is like, look, we need to get this thing. That thing that Janine wanted to open. We got to get it. It's important. It was important to my parents for whatever reason. They were protecting it. We got to get it. And Tobias is just like, okay. I was so much better because the movie realized, and the whole movie has been doing this, but we just need Tobias not to be a weird asshole like he is in the book.
Oh my God, he fought her the entire book.
Yeah. Just over everything. For no reason.
Everything. Like everything she said or suggested, he was like, no.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
And it just seems like it didn't come from anywhere really, other than like he cares about her and doesn't want her to get hurt, but it just seems kind of like, And so I love that he's just like, okay, yeah, let's do it. It also just cuts all the convoluted nonsense of the scheming with Marcus.
End of this book.
They're scheming with Marcus, and then she goes behind, because there's like 8 layers here of like the factionless and Tobias and the other Dauntless are going to like attack and take down Erudite.
Yeah.
And tear the system down. But the Dauntless think they're just going to take Erudite down. Factionless want to tear it all down.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Marcus wants to get this thing before this all goes down, because if they don't, then it'll get destroyed or this information, which again, I'm not really sure why it matters that much, because he knows what it is. But again, I guess the idea is we have to have a specific copy of this message. Otherwise people won't believe us or something like that. Sure. I guess I can buy that. And so she goes behind Tobias's back
to work with Marcus,
and Christina just agrees to this, like, okay, sure, like ride or die, I guess, whatever. And then so the three of them break into
they go to Amity.
Yes. And that's right, they try to get help from Amity, and Amity's like, oh, they're like, a big battle's coming, and Amity's like, well, we're not gonna go fight. But Joanna's like, I want to help, but nobody else does, so I'm leaving. Like, I'm abandoning my faction. I'm gonna go help, like, be like a peacekeeper or whatever, like medic or something like that. And it's just, there's so much, and I'm just like, what? And I love the movie. It's like, no.
We're just going to do both of these erudite scenes
all at once
right now.
Combine it together. We don't need to. We already know that the Dauntless and Factionless want to attack. We've already set that up. They can attack now because we get a little cut-in scene where they have figured out how to remove the simulation thing. So cool, they're on their way. And we don't have to worry about any of that. And we don't have to worry about this weird... It's just the whole like betraying Tobias thing was not interesting or to me. I just didn't find it interesting or enjoyable. So I was like, cut all of that. I love it so much. The only part of this that drove me crazy is that they get to the room with the box and she goes to get it. And then she stops and is like, no, we have to open it. And I'm like, yeah. Okay, what does that and then but they stay there. They apparently have to stay there. And we talked about this. I'm like, okay, I guess I get it. It just drove me crazy because I was so confused. I was like, just take it and go open it somewhere else. You just need a simulation machine, right?
Yeah.
I guess they need this very special simulation machine. Sure, maybe
because the box is like on some kind of a pedestal thing. Sure. So like maybe they don't have the tech to make it actually open.
Sure. Because I was like, look, we know the Dauntless have the simulation technology. They use it literally constantly. I guess there's something special about this specific. They don't say that. She's just like, I need to open it. And I was like, yeah, I know, but just don't open it here while you're getting hunted by whatever. Fine, all right, fine. I get why they're doing it. It all works out. It just drove me crazy at first. I was like, whatever. I guess that specific machine is important. And then, as we mentioned, because we combine all this, we cut all of them getting back into Erudite HQ. And all of this in the book is just terrible. We mentioned this earlier, but it's just terrible.
It's just so nonsensical. Yeah.
Like, so the first thing to me that really stuck out is it's her, Marcus, and a couple other. It's like Ferdinand is like a new
Fernando and Kara, who's Will's sister, and Christina. It's this little motley crew.
Yes, and they are gonna break into Erudite, and they're gonna go through some entrance, but they can't because the door, I guess, is being. And again, I'm having a hard time to describe this because Veronica Roth is really not good at describing action and where things take place in the environment and what's happening. I was losing my mind. They break it. They're going to break in, and they're like walking down the street, and then they round a corner, I think, and they see some candor at the end of a street or so. I'm seeing it. Let me see if I can find this real quick because I could not understand what was transpiring. Half a block from Erudite quarters, I come to a sudden stop. Standing in 4 rows in front of us are a group of people, mostly dressed in black and white, spaced 2 feet apart, guns held up and ready. I blink, and they become simulation-controlled Dauntless in the abnegation sector during the simulation attack. Get a grip. She's like freaking out because of her PTSD. I blink again, and they are candor again, though some of them, dressed all in black, do look like Dauntless. If I'm not careful, I'll lose touch with where and when I am. Again, maybe we're getting an unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
that seems like an excuse for poor writing. Oh my God, Christina says, my sister, my parents, what if she looks at me because she's worried that her family is one of the candor there. And I know her thoughts because I've experienced them before. Where are my parents? I have to find them. But if her parents are like these candor, simulation controlled and armed, there's nothing she can do for them. I wonder if Lynn stands in one of these rows somewhere else. What do we do? Fernando asks. I step toward the candor. Maybe they aren't programmed to shoot. I stare into the glazed eyes of a woman in a white blouse and black slacks. How close is she right now to them? Can you tell me?
Seems like a foot away.
Half a block a minute ago, I stare into the glazed eyes of a woman in a black and white slacks. She looks like she just came from work. I take another step. Bang. By instinct, I drop to the ground, covering my head with my arms, and scramble backward toward Fernando's shoes. He helps me to my feet. How about let's not do that, he says. I lean forward, not too far, and peer into the alley between the building next to us. Is this a different place, I think? And Erudite headquarters. The candor are in that alley too, so this is a different place. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a dense layer of candor surrounding the entire complex of Erudite buildings. So this drove me crazy because I don't know, was she half a block away? Was she 2 feet? When they shot, did they shoot at her? Did they just miss her? What happened? What just transpired? I was losing my mind. I need you to write your action better so I can tell what's happening. I felt like I was losing it. It drove me crazy. Anyways, they can't get into the building because the candor have it surrounded somehow.
But they devise a brilliant plan.
They go into a building next door. This is from some other movie or something. Anyways, they go into a building where they like cross from building to building. I can't remember what it is, but they go into the building next door, and they go up and they find a ladder, and then they break the window of a floor they're on, and then they use their little glass shattering gadgets and throw it to a window on your erudite building next door. They're 3 stories in the air right now, and they take this ladder, and I assume there's at least a 20-foot gap. You know, these buildings can't be that close. This is at least probably like a 10, 15, 20-foot gap between these 2 buildings. Yeah. It would have to be.
It would have to be.
Chicago. Yeah. It's not York, England. This isn't like, these buildings aren't like 6 inches apart from each other or whatever. So they slide this ladder across, and then Christina holds one end of the ladder, and they put it through the window they break the window, they put it through the window of the other building. Christina holds the ladder on one side, and Triss is going to crawl across first to get into the erudite building. She starts crawling across. She gets towards the end, and she like slips and starts to fall. She jumps into the building and pulls herself in, and the ladder falls. And then she says that Christina was able to keep the ladder from falling too far. And I don't know if Veronica Roth understands physics at all, or if Christina is literally a superhero.
Maybe she is.
I don't understand, because this ladder would have to at least be 15 feet, 20 feet long.
Yeah.
The weight and the torque when that ladder fell... There's no way the ladder doesn't swing. She could probably hold on to it, sure. There's no way the ladder doesn't swing completely down and slam into the building that Christina and them are in. It's 100% what would happen. There's just you could not hold it up unless it's a magic ladder that's like weighs nothing.
It's a magic future ladder.
I guess it could be a magic. I didn't consider that it's a magic future ladder. I don't actually know. But she says that she was able to keep it from falling too far, and so the area or the Kandor who are down on the street below don't shoot or anything. They don't, because the ladder didn't fall far enough or whatever.
Right.
So she's fine. She gets into the building. They're able to get the ladder back up, and then Triss turns around, and there's a woman in the bathroom.
Yeah,
she's in a bathroom.
They've crawled into a bathroom,
and there's an erudite woman. Comes
she
out
walks
of
a stall.
And I was like, was she in there when you blew the window up? And there was the gunfire? Because at one point, the Kandor do shoot at them. Something happens, and they shoot up in the air. Maybe it is when the ladder like falls a little bit. I can't remember. But they do shoot up a little bit. And the erudite woman is like, oh, and she's like, oh, sorry. She like comes up with an excuse. Triss does. Yeah. And the erudite woman's like, oh, okay. Aren't you supposed to be? What is?
You're supposed to be smart.
Faction? What is? She just crawled in a shattered window in the bathroom, and this woman's like, "Oh yeah, that seems normal." But like, what is happening? This whole scene.
I had that thought, and then I was also like, "You better not let that woman leave.
No,
she's gonna go tell somebody."
Wild. The whole scene was just. Wild.
It made no sense.
I couldn't believe this whole thing. And I will agree with you, like you said earlier, that there was potential in this scene. You can see what she's going for.
Yes.
And it could be a very dramatic scene. And Fernando dies, and it's very sad. Like his glasses, he puts his fake erudite glasses in his pocket, and they fall out. And apparently that triggers when Triss almost falls off the ladder and like slams it around. They don't shoot her, but his glasses falling. And that's the other thing I don't understand. How does this Kandor like thing work? His glasses fall and hits the ground, and the Kandor shoot him. Like, why does that work? Why do they know? Wouldn't they like aim at the glass? I don't understand how this works. And apparently they're great shots now, even though they couldn't hit Triss from however distance far away she was, whether it be 2 feet or half a block. We're not sure, and we'll never know, because this book is infuriating. Anyways.
One other thing that I wanted to mention about all of the convoluted nonsense here that the movie cuts is when they go to Amity, they sneak past the traitor Dauntless guard at the gate to Amity by telling them, Christina and Triss disguise themselves as people from Amity.
Yes.
which for some reason involves a makeover with lipstick.
Yes, the lipstick.
Even though the lipstick, the Amity does not seem the type.
I was so confused when that was described originally. I thought she was getting into like a sexy spy outfit. No, I'm not even kidding. When she's like, she puts lipstick on me and like I have a red dress. I was picturing she's like a Bond girl. I was like, what? Because she has like a knife on her leg or whatever. And I was like, what are they doing? I was like, all right, I'm in it. Like this could be fun. I don't know what they're. And then they're like, oh, they're going to Amity, and Amity's like red and yellow as their colors or whatever. And I was like, oh, so it's like a smock is what she means, but okay. I don't get the lipstick. Amity doesn't seem like a lipstick type.
Yeah, it does not seem like the lipstick faction.
No,
to
not
me.
at all. Maybe the least lipstick faction other than Abnegation, maybe. Yeah.
But so they have Marcus drive them there in a truck, and then when they get there, Marcus is like, oh, these two, I'm from Abnegation, and these two volunteered to bring food or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, why would that work? Abnegation is supposed to be like in hiding.
Yeah.
Why would you tell them that you're
these guards, they're evil dauntless, right?
Yeah.
Or regular, they gotta be the evil dauntless,
they're the
right?
evil dauntless.
You're telling me that Janine hasn't been like, hey, this Marcus guy, the guy who was the literal president of our society. The literal president of our society. That's what he was previously.
Yeah.
He was the head of
he was the head of the government.
Our literal president. They don't recognize him. They're like, oh, that's the guy. That's one of the guys we're looking for.
But nobody recognizes anybody in this universe.
Everybody is face blind. Maybe that's what they did. Maybe when maybe we're gonna find out in Allegiant that when they started this whole thing, they gave everybody aphasia or whatever. Is that whatever the thing where people are face blind? They like zapped that into their brain, and that's gonna solve every mystery we've had about this series. Is like that was part of the thing when they put them in. They're like, surprise, you're face blind. I truly don't know how that even makes sense. It's wild. Again, because never mind.
Oh my god. Yeah. So Triss does fight herself in a simulation in both the book and the movie.
Yes.
I thought that the movie's version of this worked a lot better. They make it into part of the Amity test.
Yes.
And so the challenge is to be kind to herself and to forgive herself.
This is brilliant. This is an incredible change.
In the book, she just fights herself.
She fights herself because it is a security measure on Janine's lab.
Yeah.
Which, again, is
For
the
some
weirdest
reason.
security. She goes to break into Janine's lab so they can get the information. Her and Marcus do in the book. And Marcus has to go through a separate door, apparently. Whatever.
I was having a really hard time visualizing what was happening.
Two doors, and they're like in two labs next to each other, I guess. I don't know why they wouldn't just go through the same, whatever. I guess maybe they weren't sure where it goes or something. But so, and the room fills with gas, and she, in the book, and she has 5 minutes to get to the door. But it induces a simulation that is herself, and she has to fight herself in the book. But it's so weird, and it makes no sense. Because you're like, why would that be the security measure? Why would you not just have a better security? Like, that's such a weird security measure. I don't know. It just seems like such a strange, archaic, convoluted security measure. But whatever, sure, fine. But in the movie, great, fantastic. You get to do the same thing. She has to fight herself, but it's not fighting herself. She has to learn to love herself. And I love the line in the movie. She says, you're going to fight her, the one you really hate. Simulation Janine says that to her. It's fantastic. I was initially couldn't figure out. I was like, well, how is this the Amity test? Because I was thinking about the book's version, where what happens in the book version, she conquers this, again, so dumb. She conquers this simulation in the book by literally manifesting a gun on the table and realizing that because she can't beat herself, because they're equally matched, and she can't, whatever. But she realizes that simulation her isn't as desperate as Triss
they
is.
have like different motivations.
Do they? Wouldn't she be an exact copy of her in that moment? Whatever, sure, fine. Let's say they have different. I don't know why. She knows she's more desperate, and so she manifests a gun and shoots herself.
Yeah.
And she knows herself won't shoot her because she's not as desperate. She knows near her has all the same like PTSD and trauma that she does.
And thus can't use
use the gun. But apparently doesn't have the same. She has everything leading up to the moment. How does she exact copy of her, but doesn't have the same desperation? Wouldn't she have the same desperation if she's so similar that she has the same, trauma and exact everything? Why doesn't she have the same desperation in this moment? Again, it's because she's defending the door, and I'm trying to. I don't. Whatever. And so she shoots herself. It's terrible. It's stupid. The movie's version, great. She has to learn to love herself.
Oh my God, themes.
Again, the only criticism I have of this is that in the movie, she just like stands there and lets Mirror Triss like run into her, and she just kind of explodes. I thought that was kind of what I thought was going to happen. Is she was going to run at her and try to punch, and then she was going to like hug her or something. And I think it might have been cheesy, but I think you could have figured out a way to have her like embrace herself that felt good or something. I don't know, maybe not, but I don't hate the movie version where she runs at her and she just lets it happen and boom, she let blah. But the overall idea is so much better in the movie.
Yes.
Oh, almost done. I'm sorry. I'm getting so worked up. I really like in the movie that because Janine doesn't know what the message is in the movie, whereas in the book she does. She already knows what this information is. Once Triss finally unlocks the box and the message plays, Janine is there at this point in the other half of the room.
The message plays and everyone's just standing there like gobsmacked.
Yeah. And after it finishes, Janine's like, yeah, no, we're going to destroy that. We're going to get rid of that. And we're going to keep, I want my control still. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
It makes so much sense. In the book, she, like I said, she didn't know, or she already knew what the message said. And she just doesn't destroy it, I think, because it's like against her faction encoding to destroy information. Like literally that's because there's no other reason she wouldn't destroy this.
Yeah.
If she wants to maintain control and blah, 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 and keep other people from getting it. Literally only reason that the movie or the book could come up with for why she didn't destroy this is because I think I remember them saying it's information and it's like a mortal sin for Erudite to destroy information.
Erudites don't do that.
Okay.
Sure.
I just don't. And again, it gets back to we'll get to it. It gets back to the whole problem with this whole society and everything. It's like, are these people strict rule following faction people or are they not? I don't, like I said, it once again feels like the book is implying, I can't figure out how real these factions are because it once again feels like the book is implying that most of the people in this society actually do fit into these weird, super narrow personality factions.
Yeah.
And some of them just magically don't. And I guess we'll see in the Legion. I don't understand where that's going or what the point is. And this, the way the movie ends, it actually just ends in a way that makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
It ends on such a hopeful note.
Yeah.
That this actually like would work as an ending to the series.
It absolutely would.
Like most of our loose ends get tied up.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, it could just stop here. It could be a duology.
We could. I was like, can we just stop here? I will say that I didn't hate the book's ending. It also left me really interested to be like, what the heck comes next in like a morbid curiosity.
And much more of a cliffhanger than book one.
Yes, much more of a cliffhanger. And I didn't hate the ending of this book. I thought it was interesting and like, because it is a big curveball and you're like, well, what is going to happen? But the movie still gives you a similar-ish cliffhanger, but it gives you also a little bit more of a satisfying conclusion where it could just be, they go out, they leave.
That could just be the end.
Because the big thing is that in the movie at the end, we see the gates open and everybody start heading out to leave.
Yeah.
In the book, we just end on chaos in the room that Triss is in after the announcement plays, like the message plays. Chaos erupts and we end and we have no idea. Whereas in the movie, we get this kind of hopeful, like, oh, let's go. Let's see what's going to happen. Again, I think both are interesting. I just like the movies because it gives it's just more satisfying. And then finally, I really like in the movie having Evelyn kill Janine.
Yeah.
She was the one here to topple this whole system and everything. I understand Tori's motivation in the book, and I didn't hate the scene where she kills her. I thought it worked okay. But I knew in the movie it was never going to be Tori. She's just not in it enough. We don't know anything about her brother. I think we do know that her brother died.
Yeah, I think she does tell Triss that story in the first one.
Yeah.
But
it's not a big thing. So yeah, I knew it wasn't going to be Tori. I actually am glad it wasn't. I think Evelyn makes more sense. She's just a more important character.
Yeah.
And I liked having her.
And because the movie cuts pretty much everything with the factionless actually wanting to seize control,
which we'll get to in a few minutes.
Have giving her like a kind of darker moment at the end there could be good for like going into whatever the heck's gonna happen in part 3.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about what the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Triss does hack her hair off after they are in Amity.
Yes.
She gets it really neat and tidy with her gardening shears.
In the movie. Yeah.
I had a little chuckle in the book because she's like struggling to fix her hair and Susan helps her braid it. And then immediately after Susan leaves, she just hacks it off. Yeah. Like, imagine being Susan and seeing her after that.
Yeah, like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah, the only difference there is that in the book, it's not described as short as it is in the movie.
Yeah,
which we
it's
talked
described
about.
As like chin length.
It's like chin length. In the movie, it's very short because it was for her role in The Fault in Our Stars. So she just left it there, which I think it's fine. It works. It's whatever. I thought Amity's main building with like the tree in the middle and like the big cool dome thing was neat. Look pretty spot on. We couldn't really see in the book. The tree is described as being like hydroponic and being like over this big water thing. It sounded really cool, but it was close enough. I thought it was neat.
Yeah. The Traitor Dauntless have like little bits of erudite blue in their black clothes.
In the book, it's described as armbands, and in the movie, it's just like more integrated into their outfits, but it is like a little arm patch thing.
Same idea.
Yeah, same idea. Yeah, for sure. Tobias reveals himself to the factionless, who he is, says his name to get them to not attack him, because then they take him to Evelyn. The whole truth serum scene, other than like changing some of the questions and like trimming it down a little bit,
it was pretty close.
But it was pretty close, and including specifically the moment where like Tobias says that he was gonna leave Dauntless, but once Trish showed up, he decided not to and wanted to stay with her and that sort of thing.
Tobias can say "I love you," but Triss cannot.
Yes, until the end, she does. Say
say it at the end.
Yeah.
We also have a fade to black, sexy times before Triss leaves to turn herself in.
Was that in the? Book?
Yeah, they have fade to black, sexy times.
Okay. Triss turning herself in plays out pretty much the same. She goes in the middle of the night after. Her and Tobias are together, and I do like, and I don't think this was in the book. There's a little detail when she's leaving in the movie that Evelyn like watches her go and just lets her and doesn't say anything. I thought that was good.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah,
because we know Evelyn has ulterior motives that she's working towards, so she's not going to ruin that.
We talked about some of the details with this, but Caleb does fully go back to Erudite at the end. There's also a moment in both when she's in Erudite where there's a simulation, and we don't know it's a simulation at first, and we think that Tobias is like trying to break her out. Yeah. And then she realizes it, and she's like, "You're not in a sim. You are a sim."
Yeah. It's great. I thought that scene worked really well in both, and particularly in the movie. I liked after she says that he like disintegrates and blows away in the wind. I thought that was cool in the movie.
Yeah. And Tobias does get captured by Erudite.
Yeah. Again, the only difference here is that we find out in the book he did it. He says initially like, "Oh, I couldn't be without you" or whatever.
Yeah.
But then he has like this ulterior motive that it's like he's got to get
like,
inside.
I need to find out some stuff because the factionless and the dauntless are gonna attack in like a week or whatever.
Rescue you or whatever.
Yeah.
I like that in the movie they're just like, nah, it's because he just really loves her and wanted to save her or to die with her. Either one. Like I was like, yeah, fine, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. And then, as we mentioned, Peter uses the paralytic and saves Triss.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of similarities, but whatever. Okay, that was all of that. We don't normally do Lost in Adaptation, but we do this time. We're going to try to move through this quick because we got a lot to discuss. But we have some stuff to discuss in Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
So I didn't know where to put this, so I wanted to just put it here as the secret MacGuffin message at the end. I want to talk about this. In the book, the message at the end is a message that they gave to abnegation leadership at the start of the experiment. And in that message, they do say, once the Divergent become abundant amongst you, you should open the gate and emerge from isolation and come back and help us or whatever.
Yeah.
In the film, it is clearly a message that nobody has seen and that can only be accessed once like a true divergent or whatever emerges. And I was like, okay, so they need the divergent to ascend, and then they can open this box in the movie and leave the city. Either way, so that's what it is in the movie, and leave the city so that they can go out and help society overcome violence or whatever. And whether it's opening the box or if this was just the plan, and regardless of what the message is at the end or how it was delivered, whether it was pre the experiment or post the experiment, the whole idea of the experiment is we're going to create this experiment where we create these factions, hoping that some special super personality flexible people will emerge and then leave the city again so they can help the society, the world, US, I don't know, overcome violence and stuff. But like the faction system was fake to begin with. So I don't understand where this is going or what the thought process behind this experiment was. How did they fathom, whoever created this, that creating this fake class system would cause divergence to emerge, and why would they expect these people to be particularly good or helpful? I don't understand what the thought process was going into this. Because like, wouldn't basically everyone be divergent because the class system is completely fake and imposed? Or is it not fake and imposed? Like, but if that's the case, why doesn't all of society organize this way? I don't understand. And again, it comes back to this question of, are the divergent like physically different? And they are, we're aware, because when they scan her brain at the end, she has a special brain. And in the book, they literally go into detail of like,
we learn all about her special brain,
her amygdala,
and her mirror neurons, and
all this sort of stuff. So she literally has a different brain. Like, what am I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this magic brain divergent thing, and how again I don't understand what is happening and what the thought process was.
Maybe in the outside world, they somehow have gotten to a point where these like faction personality things are real. So they seal all of these people in, and they say, we'll have them switch around factions on their choosing day to see if through interbreeding we can get a normal person again.
Maybe.
I'm so excited to find out.
I guess, dude.
Look, I'm trying my best here. But this series' idea of divergence has been super clunky from the beginning. And I think that I personally would chalk that up to Veronica Roth just not having a ton of experience and not thinking her ideas all the way through.
It has to be,
I think she came up with like one singular idea and was like, ooh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I'll make a society based on personality quizzes.
Right. Yes.
And then
there will be these people who like emerge who are different
and didn't like think it all the way out.
Yeah.
Because the implication in the first book very much felt like the 100%. Message was going to be that everyone is actually a little bit divergent because we're all just normal people who contain multitudes.
Absolutely. That's what I 100% thought was going to be the case.
And to me, the addition of like the biology of a divergent and like diving deeper into it reads like she panicked upon getting a deal for an entire series and realized she'd have to explain her ideas more in depth and wrote herself into a corner.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm hoping that Allegiant will give us a better explanation of the Chicago experiment and why they would be needing to try to breed people who answer D, all of the above, when they take a personality quiz. I don't know.
For real, I just do not understand what in the world I'm so fast. That's the thing I'm most fascinated to see and hope we get some answer to is what the hell was the thought process behind this, and what were the what was the circumstances that led to this? Like, why? It's just such a weird thing that I can't fathom. I can't even try to like parse out in my brain the logic behind creating this system thinking that it would somehow create special. I don't get it. But even if I can understand the idea of like, here's what I get. I understand creating these factions, putting people in this fake faction society, knowing that people will not will not stay in those factions because this is not how people are. Like I can understand that, but then again, it gets all messed up when seemingly a lot of people do just like to be in the factions they're in. And
it seems like most people.
It's like a very small percentage of people that are like, actually, I don't like being shoehorned into this tiny, very specific, very like narrow personality. Like apparently most people are like cool with that. It's just weird. It's just,
and some of them are so much narrower than others.
Yes.
Like Candor, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Your whole personality is based on being honest.
I'm honest.
You sound like an asshole.
Yeah, like like Amity, I get at least a little bit. Our personality trait is we're happy. Like, okay, sure, that's like an ideal goal. Like I get it. But like, Candor is like, okay, so literally it's just like we're honest to a fault. Like why are so many people into that?
That's not a personality.
No, it's just so strange, and I'm hoping we get some answers. All right, our next question here for Lost in Adaptation is not a question so much as we want to discuss Veronica Roth's attempt at see everyone is kind of evil, maybe. I don't know, which... This is, we didn't know where to put this, so we just want to discuss it here.
And this is like kind of specifically in regard to the faction list.
Yes.
Even though we talked throughout about like different examples of look, all of the factions have evil in them.
Yeah.
Da-da-da.
Or sorry, maybe I should rephrase that. Veronica Roth's attempt at, see, homeless people actually are evil if we let them get real uppity. I don't know, like... That's kind of the message. It's like, look, if we let homeless people get too much power, they will just kill us all. Like, it's okay. But so in the book, and this is kind of a better in the movie because the movie removes this basically.
Yeah.
But there's this setup and implication in the book that the factionless and Evelyn are like basically gonna purge they're
like they just want a coup,
and it's not just they want to burn the system down, because that you're like, oh yeah, no, I agree with that, the system's stupid. But it's not just we want to burn the system down. That immediately has to go to, and we're gonna cleanse the unclean, and we're gonna destroy all the knowledge that the erudite collected. We need to burn the society back down to like square one, and like it's they become it's wild.
No, there was like a point before the like actual reveal, when Evelyn's giving a speech to the troops, and she says something about like cleansing this world of the erudite or something like that. And I was like, well, that's always a positive sign when your military leader uses the word cleansing. That's great. Always just like a sign of great things to come. And then at the end, they like basically trick all of the Dauntless into handing over their weapons, seemingly like one at a time. Was the vibe that I got.
That is, because we see it happen with like Triss.
With Tori, I think, or somebody.
Or whoever,
and I got very strong like Mockingjay vibes from this. Like not as well done, not as nuanced, but just this like overall message of like, power, people who want power are always bad, and any attempt at revolution or change is just going to result in another awful regime. And like,
I already had problems with that in Hunger Games. Like, I like it in Hunger Games, but I already had a little bit of issue with that in Hunger Games to some extent. I thought it was just handled a lot better. Sorry,
it was handled a lot better in Hunger Games. And like, I get it. I get what you're saying. I understand it. I'm not stupid. But also, like, what is the messaging here? Like, what are we supposed to take away from this?
That was my main,
Everything is always going to be bad, so we should just never try to improve things. Cool.
Oh, so
great.
All these people who've been systematically disenfranchised in this society to the point of comic, like not comedy, but like they're literally completely systematically disenfranchised. The fact that they decide they should do something about it is that only can apparently result in them becoming the next Hitler. Like it's literally, it's like, okay, well then fuck it. I guess we just let society suck. I don't know like what. Yeah. And again, it's a similar problem I had at the Hunger Games, which again, Hunger Games is done better and I more nuanced, and it's just better all around. No, but it's a similar idea of like, well, what the fuck do we do then?
It's giving interesting, and yet you participate in society.
Yeah. It's big neo-lib vibes. I'm like, I don't know what you want. What is your answer then? I don't know what like what do you want? I don't understand. Especially in this, where it is like in the Hunger Games, where we are in a society that is like, you know, trash, and there is no democratic representation. There's literally no, like, you know, I can see the argument if we live in a society where we actually have. I am more sympathetic to electioneering and whatnot, electoralism than most leftists, I would say. But you know, in a society where we do it's complicated. Point being, in this sort of society, I don't know what other choice you have.
Yeah.
And so then to be like every time the result is, well, they also just end up bad. It's like, well, fuck. Okay, then fine. I guess we don't do anything. I guess we just kill ourselves. Like, I don't know what we do. I don't. Because another thing they do is they specifically, and then one of the big things that was wild is that, and which makes no sense, and I just don't buy from Evelyn, is like, I buy at least to some extent the like, let's purge the erudite and destroy their information. I don't like it, but I at least kind of understand it. But they're like, oh, in Amity, since you guys didn't help us, you're gonna keep making food for us, but you get no they're literally propose enslaving Amity.
Yeah.
They're literally like, oh, surprise, by the way, Amity, you guys are slaves now. Oh, okay. That seems completely out of character for the factionless and for Evelyn, at least from what we've seen. I don't know where that comes from. Again, other than it is just because we want the narrative of, power corrupts. Anytime anybody, violent uprisings always result in bad stuff. And it's like, yeah, man, usually. But I don't know what else. Yeah, I'm just repeating myself. What else do you want them to fucking do? What do you want them to do then? Petition their governor? I don't know what you want them to do. And maybe we'll find out. Maybe.
Yeah, perhaps.
To be fair, to try to caveat this and be fair, there's a whole other book. Who knows? Maybe things will go a different direction and we'll eat crow on this. I don't know.
It was just very frustrating to read at the 11th hour.
Yes. Yeah. And then my final question was, it is a little one, but it was about the timeline.
Yeah, timeline question mark.
Timeline, because, and now this is kind of a book to movie thing, so maybe it's just a movie problem or something. But when Triss enters the lab, she gets scanned. In the book. When Triss enters Janine's lab, she gets scanned by something, and it says like Triss Pryor, Divergent, second generation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's second generation Divergent.
Maybe.
I thought it was of her family. Now I'm thinking, and maybe it's Divergent.
The place I got confused was that it reads second generation in that scene, right? But then at the end, when we get the hologram message from the experiment founder or whatever, she says that her name is Edith Pryor.
Yes.
Implying, obviously, that she's Triss's ancestor.
Yeah, one of her ancestors.
But then I'm like, what? But she would have to at least be Triss's grandmother. So why did the simulation say she was second generation?
That was my question.
Or am I just stupid and I don't understand how generations work?
That was my question, is that because she says Edith Pryor, which means it's her ancestor, and at the end of the movie, Janine says it has been 200 years since this whole thing started. So that's way more than 2 generations. So if Edith Pryor, the person who started one of the people who started this whole thing, is Triss's ancestor, it would be like 12th generation or something like that. You know what I mean? Like she would have to be because Edith Pryor would have been Triss's great grandmother or something like that for the 200 years to make sense.
Right.
If she went in at the beginning, Edith Pryor was there at the beginning of this thing, and now we have Triss Pryor 200 years later. There's 15 generations. I don't know how many, whatever the math is. There's, you know what I mean? There's not 2 generations between there. The only thing I can think, and this is the thought I just had, is when it says second generation, it's not referring to her family, but the Divergents.
Yeah,
is that she's
that
the
makes
second
more
generation
sense.
of Divergents, because we do know her mom is Divergent.
Yeah.
And maybe she was the first one. If that's the case, okay.
All right.
Fine.
God bless and go forth.
Seems weird. Because it seems like the generation thing would make more sense to...
Well, yeah, because I immediately connected that to at the end when she says her last name was Pryor.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. So either I don't know what's going on here, or that was a little goof where they maybe didn't realize that people were going to connect those two things.
Or it hasn't been 200 years.
Yeah.
Because second generation, I think, could work if it was her grandmother. She's the second generation in this, like, you wouldn't, I guess you wouldn't count Edith.
Okay.
She would, I mean, I guess you could say she's first generation, but I would maybe say that she's like or whatever, like an origin.
Yeah. And then her
first
parents
generation,
are first gen. And she's
Triss
second gen. Okay.
But that wouldn't be 200 years, is my point. That would be 50,
But 200 years
years
wasn't in the book, right?
No,
that was
that's
just
what I'm
the
saying.
movie.
That was just in the movie. So unless for somehow that's maybe, at least I don't remember 200 years in the book. But it has to have been something like that, because otherwise, how would people not remember stuff?
Yeah.
So it has to be like longer. It has to be 200 years. Again, I think we're just rocking around. I think what it is the Divergence thing. I think that's got to be what it is. It's the only thing that makes any sense. Yeah. I'm just gonna say that's what it is because it's the only thing that makes any sense. So, all right, we got a handful of odds and ends before we get to our predictions. I opened this book, the very first page inside the cover is an excerpt. It's like an ad for Allegiant, and then it's an excerpt that is Christina forgiving, not forgiving her, but Triss acknowledging the fact that Christina forgave her for killing Will.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a hell of a spoiler. And I thought it maybe was from Allegiant or something like that. And it's from the end of this book. Why would you put a random page from the end of this book as the first page of the beginning of this?
I don't know, man.
Book?
I'm gonna say the only other place I've ever seen books do something like that is in classic bodice rippers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge spoiler, to be fair, but it is a thing that I was wondering about, like, leading into this book, like, oh, what's gonna happen with Christina? Like, oh, maybe Christina becomes a villain, maybe, who knows? And it's like, oh no, she forgives her. And I learned that before I even started this book, and I was like, are you kidding me?
I never read any of that shit.
I normally don't, but it was just right there, and I was like, what is that? I thought maybe it was like part of the book. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if it was important, and I was like, what are you doing? Okay. Also, as I said in the last episode, that Amity is my faction. Amity's out. Apparently they just like live in super humid Midwest heat all the time. Yeah. Triss talks about like all of their buildings are like super humid and hot because they're like all greenhouses. And I was like, nah, all right, never mind. I'm good. I'm going to go to Erudite where they have air conditioning.
Okay. I'm gonna retread some familiar territory from the Divergent episode, where we talked about why Triss does not recognize Tobias. But then, in this book, when they're in Amity, right?
Yeah.
And a bunch of Abnegation are also there, like, seeking refuge.
Yeah.
Triss is like, I'm not going to call him Tobias. I'm going to call him 4 so that none of them know that he's Marcus's son. And I'm like, how would they not know? How would they not know Veronica? That makes even less sense than Triss not knowing. Did he just get total reconstructive surgery? Does he not even look like he did when he lived in Abnegation? How would they know? And then Caleb was like, anyone with eyes can see it for themselves. And I was like, thank you.
That felt like
Caleb.
That felt like a reference to the fact that people were like, what?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because Caleb is like, don't people know you're Marcus's son? And he's like, well, no, why would they? And he's like, well, because you can look at you and we know who you are. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. This is a random thing that I thought was super funny. We find out from Eric that the water, because we commented on this in the first episode, that the way they try to execute Triss at the end of the first book is to put her in this
really weird
room that's like a water tank that's like a recreation of the fear simulation from earlier. And we find out in this one that Eric designed this because it was like a very clever experiment to see how she would react to a real fear like a real life version of a fear simulation, and I was like,
okay.
Again, I feel this was another one that felt like people were like, why did they kill her with a giant water tank? And Veronica was like, because Eric's evil, and he's very evil. I was like, okay, I guess.
There's a little mention when they're leaving Amity and they're running for the train. Somebody says something about if the erudite were running the train. And I was like, yo, who is running the train?
We will never know.
We may never know.
Nah.
It just circles the city at all times. And we don't know who's running it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I that would be a fun, like, that's like it's not nearly big enough, but I imagine that's like an SNL. Like, if this were as big as like Game of Thrones or something, that's like an SNL skit. It's like the train driver in Divergent. And it's like all the Dauntless. It's like a guy sitting in the front. We're like watching from his perspective, and it's played by like what's the guy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine? I feel like Adam or no. Oh my God, what is
which one?
The main guy.
Oh,
what was that actor's name?
No, that's his character's name.
Jake Peralta. Yeah, that's fine. It's Jake Peralta. That gets the point across. It's Jake Peralta, and he's like sitting there and he's driving the train, and it's just like him being really annoyed. Like every time the Dauntless get on, they're all like yelling, and he's like trying to do the announcements, and like the drums are playing really loud, and it's just like this. And he's like, as always, we're going to remind you, please do not jump off the train. For God's sake, I would stop if you... And they just completely ignore it because they're all like screaming and whooping the whole time. Like, that's a great, like, again, if this was a bigger property, I could imagine that skit happening.
And also in the movie, so when they escape Amity, they're wearing like Amity clothes, and then they hook up with the factionless, and then when we see them on their way to Kandor, I was like, oh, thank God they were able to get some cool clothes from the factionless.
Yes.
They changed into like all leather.
All leather. Let's go. We've talked about the Tristan Tobias sex scene, but cracked me up because in the prequel I talked about how apparently they had to edit this down. It just fades to black, and apparently in the original cut it was longer, but it made people really uncomfortable or something, and I was like, it's very funny. But in the book we had some lines that were some of our favorite moments from this in the book.
We had another classic YA sexy times line. His body, my body, we were so close. There was no difference.
I don't know where he started and I began. Yeah, it's a classic. It is a classic. My favorite, because this is not a classic, and I've never heard this ever.
This is the only place I've ever encountered this one.
Ever. She kisses him, and she's like, he tastes like water. And I was like, what? Like water? What a weird thing to think of when kissing your love. So he tastes like water. Oh, all right, okay. Sure. I mean, it's not bad, I guess. It's kind of nothing, but sure. Oh, God.
I have a world building question. Why have trials in a world where truth serum exists?
There's no reason.
What is this society doing? They have truth serum.
In the movie, Jack is like, we don't normally give that out to outsiders for some reason. I guess.
Why wouldn't you just use it?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then I was confused later on because I was under the impression that Erudite made all of the serums. But then Janine is like, she wants to find out from Tobias where the factionless safe houses are. And she's like, well, I could give him some truth serum, but it's going to take too long to get Jack to hand it over. So we're going to do something else instead. And I'm like, you guys not make it? Where does it come from?
I imagine erudite? Or, wait. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was assuming that erudite made the truth serum because they make all the other serums. Yeah,
I don't know.
They're the science ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
And speaking of erudite, though, one thing I really love about these books are the descriptions of the erudite doing science.
Yeah.
It's like one person was at a computer, another person had some test tubes.
You're not even lying. But then my surroundings change. The white tunnel opens to a large room where erudite men and women in long blue jackets stand behind tables, some holding tools, some mixing multicolored liquids, some staring at computer screens. If I had to guess, I'd say they're mixing simulation serum. My favorite, there was a moment later where she walks into a room and it's like an erudite like work room, and there's just like, she describes the bench and it sounds like a computer repair shop or something, or like a VCR repair shop. She's like, the table is covered in old computer parts and there's like a mess of wires and like it's literally like Veronica Roth was like the set decorator on B movies in the 80s. And that was like her exposure to science stuff is explicitly bad B movies from the 80s where they're like in a mad scientist lab and it's like, and there's like a thing on the wall that like, there was like a glass globe with little electricity, and when you touched it, it would hit your finger.
And there was some tubes that were bubbling.
Yeah. And there's this like white steam coming out. And then there was this other thing where there was like this wall full of like metal pins, and they would push their face into it. And I'm just like, it's just like a science center. Like the thing where you like push your face, you know, like where it's like I don't know what those are called, like the little metal pin things where they had little ones you could get at home where you put your hand in it. But then like the science center or I think the Magic House in St. Louis had one that was like a wall-sized one that you could like put your body in or whatever. And it's just like her describing like things from like a science center in the science lab. Oh God. Another thing I thought was interesting about this book, and I don't know if this was because of criticism, but the Christianity yoinked right out of this book compared to the last one.
Far less
like
prominent.
Non-existent.
There were some little bits here and there.
There is. But Triss is definitely struggling with a crisis of faith. She at one point when she's about to die, she thinks she's about to be executed. She thinks, and if what my parents really believed about death is true, I'll be joining them soon. But clearly she doesn't really believe it anymore, or isn't sure. And I think that makes sense for where her character is at this point with what she's gone through. Because at one point she like literally has decided that any potential afterlife that may exist would have nothing to do with like her she's become like a deist, if anything, where she's like, if there is an afterlife, it would have nothing to do with like what I did here. Yeah. Like she's just kind of completely detached from any sort of anything approaching Christianity. But after she does die, quote unquote, after Peter like stops her, paralyzes her, and she seemingly dies, and they escape, they get back to abnegation, and Tobias washes her feet. Yep. And I was like, all right, and I'm getting some mixed messaging here. I'm not sure what I will
say though, on the subject of the Christian themes, in the book, the whole idea that abnegation was entrusted with this like super secret message information and they're the only ones who know it gave me big like, oh, we have the one true word kind of vibes.
Yes. Yeah.
We're the only ones who know the one truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Veronica Roth hyphenates haha.
Oh, does she?
When people laugh. And she's, I think, the only author I've ever seen do that, and it drove me insane.
Yeah.
I hated it.
I guess I can say I'm not a fan, but I
apparently
didn't notice. So there's this little moment that I thought was very funny. I didn't know where to put it. Where Kara, who was erudite, but she has defected because she's not, because Will dying and other things. At one point, she comes after she defects, she shows up and she like dramatically takes her fake glasses off and snaps them in half. And I was like, "Are you okay? All right, fantastic." The context of it was very silly. I don't remember what it was, but it was like a big dramatic moment where she like snaps her glasses, and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
There's a little moment, the scene in the book that I talked about earlier where Marcus is helping Christina and Triss sneak into Amity. That made no sense. But in this scene, Christina, like off the cuff, invents this whole backstory for them.
Yeah.
And she refers to Marcus as Joshua.
Yeah.
And then once they get in, her and Triss are talking about it, and Triss says something about like, well, Joshua's not an abnegation
I think Marcus
name.
says that.
Marcus
says to her, he's like,
says
hey,
that?
why did you talk so much? Like, and basically Christina was like covering, she's like, oh, they get, cause it's like an erudite guard or somebody.
It's a dauntless guard.
It's a dauntless guard. She's like, oh, so that's what it is. She's like, Amity like overshares. They talk too much and it makes people uncomfortable or something like that. So that's why she started talking a bunch. And he's like, well, Joshua isn't an abnegation name though. You shouldn't have used that name or something.
And I was like, why wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
It's like traditional and Bible-y. I don't, there's no reason to me that Joshua would not be an abnegation name.
The only thing I could think is that this is either not setting up something necessarily, but is a clue as to what maybe is going to happen. And that abnegation is not, I don't know. That was such a weird specific detail to include because I had the same thought. I'm like, well, abnegation's like, clearly the Christian culty group.
Yeah, they're Christian coded.
Yeah. So, and it's that Joshua is one of the more Christian-y names.
It is like one of the more Bible-y names.
The fact that he makes that point, the only thing I think, either it's an inside joke for all Veronica Roth's Christian friends, because they're like, or it means something more, and it's going to be like, oh, surprise. Actually, you thought the abnegation were the Christians. They're not. It's actually, I don't know. It felt too weird to not mean something to me because I actually had the same thought. I was like, that's weird.
Actually, I feel like it might be more likely that it's an in-joke.
Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, touched on it, but when Lynn gets shot at the end of the book and she is dying and she can't get saved because the factionalists destroyed all of the...
Yeah, they destroyed the hospital wing.
All of the medical stuff again, which, oh God.
Yeah.
And so she's bleeding to death and she can't get saved. And she says something about how she loved Marlene. And Uriah says, we all loved her. And Lynn says, that's not what I mean. And then dies. And I was like, is that implying what I think it was?
I had the same thought.
And I think it is.
I was like, oh, wow. Veronica, you just buried your gay.
The most, like, the quickest burying of a gay.
Yes.
That is like, surprise, she's gay, dead. Like, that is, I was amazed. I was like, that was the most efficient bury your gay trope I have ever seen.
Oh, my God. I was not expecting this series to go the way that it has.
This is wild. I wasn't either. I thought it was going to be boring. It is anything but. It's just weird. My last note, because it cracked me up as I was flipping through the bonus materials at the end, there's a faction playlist.
I love this so much.
And it cracked me up. I started flipping through. It's like 3 songs for each faction. And some of them are whatever. I don't know what some of them are. A couple highlights. Amity has one of their songs is No Envy, No Fear by Joshua Radin. Candor, I love this one. I don't even know what this is, but this one, Candor, one of their songs, 2 Points for Honesty by Guster.
Love that.
And then Factionless, all 3 of theirs are fantastic. It's Uprising by Muse, I Want to Break Free by Queen, and Escape by 30 Seconds to Mars, which I know all of those songs, actually. They're all good songs, but it gives so, if a 15-year-old was making a playlist of their faction, like this is what I would imagine a fan would make. And maybe it was. I didn't actually pay attention.
Part of the reason that I love this is that it feels very Stephenie Meyer coded to me.
Yes.
Because a big thing back in the day was that she had like extensive playlists on her website for like the books and the characters and like this is what I listened to while I was writing and and it was all very on the nose.
Very on the nose, yeah. I love it. It's so much. I can't get over when it's like literally I want to break free. The thing, literally an literally a direct statement of the thing that is motivating this group is the name of the song. All right, fair enough. Sure. All right, that was it for odds and ends. Let's go ahead and see how we did predicting the Divergent trilogy.
It's gonna happen, Edward. I've seen it.
All right, we're gonna slam through this because we gotta wrap this up. My first prediction for Insurgent was Triss and Tobias get married in Insurgent in an intimate ceremony at Amity Farms, primarily so they can fuck without facing God's wrath. That did not happen. They do have sex, I think, maybe. I'm still not convinced in the book.
Faded to black. I don't know.
I'm not convinced in the book. In the movie, they definitely did. In the book, I'm not sure. But they do not get married first, so I was incorrect.
My first prediction was that Erudite is able to get to Candor first. They give them their version of the story, while the surviving Abnegation reach Amity first. The remaining Dauntless are then split between the two sides, and an all-out civil war breaks out. This did not really happen. It kind of happened.
I would say you're pretty close there.
Pretty close.
This is the best prediction.
The Dauntless are split, and there is kind of a civil war.
Yeah. I would say got pretty close.
I got pretty close. I wasn't exactly right, but I got pretty close.
Pretty close. My second one was Janine crafts a plan to put all of the factionless in an endless simulation and use them as free laborers. In the movie, she gets a sick robo-hand to replace her stabbed one. That is not even addressed in the movie.
No.
Tobias ultimately hacks it and has her strangle herself with it. No, none of that happened.
I wish that would have happened.
Would have been great.
My next prediction, Christina initially joins Triss, but then finds out that she killed Will and in an emotional rage defects to the Erudite side. That did not happen.
That was my third prediction as well. Christina becomes a villain briefly in book 2 after Triss confesses she killed Will, for ultimately rejoining the good guys and sacrificing herself to support the cause. I mean, the first part of that, not a villain, she just doesn't like Triss for a while.
Yeah.
But whatever. So no, not correct.
My next prediction was the Erudites kidnap Caleb and then allow Triss to rescue him after he's been hijacked with simulation serum a la PETA and Mockingjay. This does not happen. Caleb is just a traitor.
Yes.
And my last one,
you did an extra one.
I did an extra one, yes. Was the Erudite have some kind of science babble way to reanimate corpses and turn them into zombie soldiers, and they send Triss's parents after her? That did not happen either.
That did not happen.
I thought all of our predictions were far more interesting than what happened in this book.
I liked a lot of our predictions, yes. All right, it is time for our Allegiant predictions. My first prediction. The people of the Chicago experiment, which is what I'm calling it. I don't know what it's going to be dubbed. I'm sure it has some name, but I called it the Chicago experiment in my predictions. Emerge into the outside world, and it's a version of 2212 United States. So 200 years in the future from 2012 when this book was written. Things have deteriorated badly as the world has clearly experienced some sort of catastrophic climate/war event, but society does still exist. Barack Obama's great-great-great-great-grandson is president, but he's like the Antichrist, and the Divergent have to like fix things. I'm really thinking we're going to get some sort of Left Behind style book. Based on the Christianity themes and stuff, I'm really thinking we're going to get something like Left Behind, and the Divergent are giving me big like saved people vibes. Ultimately, Triss deposes Obama Jr. Because he was president in 2012, so that's why I picked Obama, and becomes supreme ruler of the U.S. I don't know. I have no idea. I just wanted to go for something crazy because this was the hardest prediction. The way where this book and movie ends,
my predictions are all boring.
I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah. My first prediction is that Triss will leave the city looking for answers. Like she goes out as like an envoy or whatever, and then just immediately gets captured by whoever is left still running this experiment. I think that the entire focus of the story will potentially shift from inside the city to outside.
I think it has to, at least based on the way the movie ends.
Yeah.
I think it has to. I don't know how it couldn't, unless the movie is like bullshitting. Like, you know what I mean? Like with everybody leaving, I just don't see how it couldn't. That is not the implication it gets from the book, but yeah, I would think we have to swing outside of the city. My second prediction, the simulation serum and technology gets repurposed into commercial entertainment product. Or that's how it has always been used outside of the Chicago experiment. It is essentially the from like Ready Player One. That's what I'm thinking.
Like a VR.
Yeah.
Extreme VR.
Yes.
Wait. What if?
Ready Player One prequel.
What if that is what is going on and the experiment was put on by a rival tech company who wanted to breed people who can't use the simulations of their competitors.
Yes. And this is all a weird, crazy critique of capitalism. Let's go. Come on, Veronica. You can do it.
Okay, my actual second prediction that I wrote down is that if the focus does not completely shift and we mostly stay in Chicago, I predict that Triss and Tobias will somehow end up on opposite sides of the conflict, with Tobias joining his mother and the factionless, and then Triss supporting like the rebellion against them.
I could see that. I thought about something like that, very similar, and because I actually had a prediction that was similar to that I deleted, and what part of what spurs that would be that Evelyn has Caleb executed, and that super fucks with. But the only issue I have with that is that I don't know if I would buy. Tobias doesn't really like Evelyn enough.
Yeah, it would be out of character for Tobias, but
not completely, because he does agree with the factionless to some extent. At least with the idea that burning the factions down is a good idea.
But also, I think Veronica Roth does not do a good job of keeping his character consistent anyway.
I would agree with that.
So.
I would agree with that. My final prediction, my big swing since the beginning of all of this that I had not voiced until now, because it's too dumb.
I'm so excited.
Is that all of this is a simulation.
What?
All of it. I was almost correct with the whole Chicago experiment thing, like with finding out that was all an experiment. But I'm saying that literally everything we have read up until this point is happening within a simulation. So we're getting like simulation inception. I don't know how we get there, but my thought is that when we get to the end of Allegiant, someone turns off a computer or something, and it turns out this whole thing was a simulation being run on a computer in our current time in like 2012. And someone at the end of the Allegiant is like, that all looked really fucked up. Glad we know how to avoid that now, or something. Like it all ends up being this thing that was it's all a dream ending kind of.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, or maybe not that specifically, but I'm thinking my swing from the beginning is that all of this we're going to get a rug pull at some point, that all of this is a simulation, and that everything we've been reading
was not real.
Was in fact a simulation, and that we get pulled out of that one layer further, almost like a Matrix kind of thing.
Interesting.
It's my big swing. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems unlikely, but who knows?
Well, my final prediction is that Joanna figures out a way to get the Amity happy drugs into the water supply in an effort to neutralize any conflict.
And that's how it ends. That was sick. Everybody's just
like
blissed out and like vibing.
Yes.
There you go. I'm into it. Before we get to our final verdict, we want to remind us you can head over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, any of those social media platforms. Follow us there. Make sure you interact. We'd love to see what you thought about Insurgent. You can also head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to us. Drop us a nice 5-star rating and write us a little review. We appreciate that. And if you want to support us, as we mentioned at the beginning, patreon.com/thisfilmislit. We really appreciate it. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
As we were watching this movie, I was immediately transported back to last year's summer series. The 50 Shades movies are not good. Divergent and Insurgent have similarly been not good. But like 50 Shades, they are a fascinating case study in taking deeply mediocre books and turning them into slightly less mediocre films. Insurgent the book is a clunky mess. Character motivations are unclear, I think at times intentionally, but more often as a result of what feels like a writer discovering the plot as she wrote. Mystery in a novel can be fun and exciting, but I constantly found myself struggling to care where the plot was going because I legitimately had no idea what anyone's goal was. We get bogged down with so many intersecting character motivations that we get lost in the sauce because it becomes unclear what this is all moving towards. The only character/group I found myself even remotely caring about or rooting for were the factionless, and then that all just gets blown up with a surprise they're basically the Khmer Rouge and want to destroy all knowledge and cleanse their enemies. Great. Amazing. The world building and rules in this universe are once again poorly developed, and the result is a novel that is legitimately frustrating to read. So often I found myself going, what's going on now? Wait, didn't we already know this? Wait, why are these characters arguing? It was infuriating. Tack on a character list that is both way too long and somehow devoid of anyone with any personality outside of our few main characters, and you have a recipe for a book that feels more like homework than entertainment. The movie doesn't make a lot more sense, but good lord does it benefit from the editing the screenwriters did. Our cast of characters is pruned down to something more manageable, our protagonist and antagonist have fairly clearly defined goals, and some of the more baffling inconsistencies and contradictions from the novel are cleaned up. And we even get something close to a satisfying conclusion to this entire series. No, seriously, this movie's ending could be how this whole series concluded, and I think I'd be happy. I don't think this movie is particularly good, and I have no idea if it would make much sense to someone who hasn't read the book. But as someone who had to suffer through this mess of a middle installment, I have to give it to the film strictly based on the number of times I said, oh, thank God they got rid of that while we were watching the film.
I've read a lot of books in my lifetime. Some amazing, some pretty bad, and most somewhere in the middle. I regret to say that Insurgent was pretty bad. The plot was clunky and meandering. There were far too many secondary and tertiary characters to keep track of. The world building, again, left much to be desired. The author did a not insignificant amount of telling and not showing. And as we discussed in the prequel, there were consistency errors that made the bloated, overpopulated story even harder to follow. The movie manages to fix, or at least mitigate, a lot of these issues by cutting some plot elements and pulling others closer together, nixing several characters, and devising an overhauled explanation for Divergents and how it plays into Janine's plan and the super secret MacGuffin message. The two are on a more even ground when it comes to themes. Some of the themes that seemed obvious in the series' first installment feel watered down or even completely abandoned in Insurgent, and I'm left not knowing what this story wants me to take away from it. Not everything that the movie does works perfectly, but it was far more digestible than the book. I have to give it to the movie once again, and cross my fingers that the third and final installment in this series doesn't leave me with more questions than answers.
Got a bad feeling about that one.
I also have a bad feeling, but let a girl hope for a minute.
Katie, what's next?
Up next, we have an in-betweensy episode, so we are not jumping directly to Allegiant, and we will be talking about the Lorax.
Yeah, that'll be a fun little diversion. Little Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, Dr. Seuss. I believe that's a 2012
Yeah, I haven't seen
adaptation.
This movie. Yeah.
I think I've seen parts of it. I don't know if I've seen the whole thing.
All right. Well, that'll be in 2 weeks' time. In 1 week's time, we have all of your feedback, everything you had to say about Insurgent, and we'll be previewing the Lorax. Probably learning a little something. We'll see. Maybe we won't have time, depending on how much feedback you all give us. But until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.